and businesses. Horrific business. I'm sorry, I was interrupted by my Zoom app. One moment. Okay. We suffered, along with many communities, just horrific damage as a result of the storm of June 25th and 26th. Grosse Pointe Park was hit exceptionally hard. Our residents and businesses are dealing with incredible challenges as we all try to work together to recover. The purpose of this town hall is provide information to our residents regarding the storm, its aftermath, recovery efforts, and next steps. It also will provide an opportunity for residents to make comments and ask questions. From the city, in attendance this evening are members of the City Council, City Manager Nick Seisland, Public Service Supervisors Patrick Thomas and Tom Jenny, Public Safety Director Brian Jarrell and Deputy Director Jim Bostock, Assistant to the City Manager Leah Smith, OHM Advisors Engineering Consultant Patrick Droz, Assistant City Attorney Erica Schell, and Insurance Counsel from McGraw-Morris. At this time, I'm going to turn the meeting over to City Manager Seisland, and he will continue the town hall.
Thank you, Mayor Denner and members of the public and City Council. I want to thank you all for attending our town hall tonight. Tonight in this meeting, we'll share resources, frequently asked questions, dive into infrastructure, listen to you, and answer questions to the best of our ability. As we move forward, please follow or visit the city website, Facebook, and sign up through Constant Contact for city emails for city information. Everyone at City Hall and Council knows of someone impacted by the storm that hit our region. This was truly a devastating event for our community. I want to thank you, the residents, for your patience and understanding as we move forward. We want to reiterate our commitment to you for cleanup and are continuing to engage in an exhaustive investigation and evaluation of this event. When additional information is available to us, we will share it with you and welcome further discussion after a full investigation is complete. With that said, I'm going to have our Patrick Droz share a PowerPoint slide, and then I will be going into some resources and frequently asked questions where members of our administration, including Public Works and Public Safety, will be speaking as well. Thank you, Patrick. So I'm going to go ahead and share my own screen now with some frequently asked questions. This information has just been shared to the city website and official information, as well as the PowerPoint slide that we'll be going through tonight. What we wanted to do is provide you resources that, there's some frequently asked questions within the community, such as garbage cleanup, Great Lakes Water Authority, water, how the city's helping out right now, and other resources that we have available. And as this meeting progresses tonight, we're hoping that we can add to this list that'll be able to help you further understand where the city's at and what we can do moving forward. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to dive in for a couple of these real quick, and then I'm going to have our Public Works Department take over regarding garbage pickup. One of the questions frequently has been asked to the city is, why hasn't my trash been picked up? Department of Public Works work their resources and outside contractors work in cleaning up the city. The city has contacted upwards of 30 different contractors, sought emergency bids for trash removal, and contacted the county emergency management for assistance. Public Works is continuously monitoring the areas of need and asking for your patience as additional resources are brought in to help. Trash being picked up due to the nature of the cleanup, it is hard to predict. But right now, it's taken about 8 to 10 homes per garbage truck to fill up right now, just for perception. With that said, to go to the transfer station, which is either in Warren or Detroit, usually takes about 45 minutes. Now it takes 90 to 120, depending on the line. And the dump closes at 5 p.m. Time per street, right now we're seeing that it's taken about 3 to 5 days per residential street, average of 6 homes before a truck is full. Afterwards, the city drives to the transfer station to unload the material. With that, I will go ahead and let Tom Jenny and Pat Thomas discuss the contractors within the city and themselves.
All right, everybody. Sorry, we lost our picture here for some reason. Can everyone still hear us? Okay.
Yes.
So, okay, sorry. As of right now, the city has at least 11 outside contractors working with us. You have a list of them right there, Grosse Point Park. We're working with Santoro, Landscape Services, GFL, of course, Denman, Backer, Grosse Point Shores, Grosse Point Woods, Homrich, and Roncelli. We have an average of probably right now going on 60 vehicles picking up garbage at any given time. That's including wheel loaders to dump trucks to garbage trucks. The city is working with 5 of our own, or 3 of our own, and two rented ones from Ohio. Pat, do you have anything else with that?
No, Tom pretty much covered that.
So what I wanted to detail within this information here is that with each contractor we have within the city, this shows the amount of vehicles, the amount of laborers that we are able to bring in over time, as well. That is at the very beginning of this event, we've certainly had our challenges along with other communities that of hiring these same contractors. We're all competing against each other. So just for reference, you're able to see the amount of vehicles that we have and laborers within the community.
Nick, someone near you should mute their device.
Thank you, Mayor Denner. So one of the questions that's come up is when the cleanup started, why did we start where we did with the Public Works Department? They began the cleanup on the Sunday following the storm. Resources were limited to 3 Grosse Point Park crews initially. They were deployed north of Jefferson, south, and on cross streets. The magnitude of this task due to the volume of debris became immediately apparent and required the city to contract on with as many outside services as possible and deploy them across the city. As well, we have where we have picked up within the city as of July 7th, and further we'll have a map that actually shows in detail where we are at. So I'm going to skip that section. Why is it taking longer for flood debris to clean up compared to 2016? In 2016, the impact the city experienced occurred primarily in Grosse Point Park. It was not as widespread across Wayne County as in the June 25th, 26th storm. Grosse Point Park was able to bring in adequate numbers of GFL crews, and no outside contractors were required to clean up in 2016. Grosse Point Park is now competing with other communities such as Detroit, Grosse Point City, Farms and Woods, Dearborn, Garden City, etc. Right now, our contractors are taking appliances that were set out in the curb. And then I'm going to go ahead and let Public Works discuss further on what to do with your hazardous waste.
Yeah, as far as hazardous waste, basically, if they can just bring it out to the curb, that would be fantastic. I know we were telling the residents to actually take it down to Windmill Point Park. Right now at Windmill Point Park, we did have our environmental company, ERG, come in there. They actually came in, wrapped everything up. They've got probably 75% of that stuff that was down at the park all wrapped up right now and put it into a 50-foot trailer. You can continue to put it out there. We have a contractor that's going to come out and go ahead and pick up all the paint for us to get it down there to the park, to get it on pallets and everything else, so we're capable of getting it out there. So if we continue to keep putting it out, we'll be able to handle it.
Thank you, Pat. All right, so continuing on, and this information again is available on the city website currently if you'd like to follow along, and we'll be updating as we move forward. Are you still picking up in the alley? Public Works is picking up in the alley continuously. They've had to go through a couple times due to the amount of personal items and trash that are there. Trash pickup is now on its regular normal schedule as it had been delayed for a couple days with the storm. Frequently asked question as well, that has been brought to our attention is, has the city contacted the National Guard for assistance? The city and other Wayne County communities deployed its emergency operations plan and requested assistance from the county and requested the assistance of the National Guard. This is to be determined further by the governor of the state of Michigan at this time. During the water, as soon as the storm hit, there was a question about has it been tested and it's safe to drink? Yes. The city public works performs water testing as required by the state, and it was tested during the storm for quality purposes. As well, there's information here that I'm going to skip over, but it's if your water is discolored, what you should do. Definitely please contact Public Works at 313-822-5100 if there's any questions or concerns. While I'm at that, I'll see if Tom Jenny or Pat Thomas have any further thoughts about that.
Yeah, we did run into a stint just recently with a little bit of discolored water. Did call Great Lakes Water Authority. They said they had an issue with one of the valves. So actually, I got probably about 7 calls, but no calls back. Water cleared up, and we are good to go.
Thank you, Pat. Great Lakes Water Authority. There's been discussions and questions. Have you been in contact with the Great Lakes Water Authority? Yes. At the request of Grosse Pointe Park from myself and the mayor, the Great Lakes Water Authority staff briefed officials from the Grosse Pointes about the Great Lakes Water Authority's facilities response to the June 25th, 26th flood event. GLWA handles our stormwater and sewage flows for the entire region. GLWA confirmed that both of its pumping stations for the east side of Detroit and the Grosse Pointes did not operate at peak design capacity. Starting at 11 p.m. June 25th, 3 of its stormwater pumps at the Freud pumping station did not operate at all during the storm event as they should have. Similarly, 1 of the 6 pumps that should be operating during a heavy storm event at Connor Creek pumping station did not operate at all during the storm event. Both facilities suffered power outages of different causes. At the Connor Creek facility after midnight, 3 other pumps were delayed from starting by approximately an hour. 2 other pumps at Connor could not be used to replace the 6th pump as they were being serviced. The city of Grosse Pointe Park and the other Grosse Pointes support the city of Detroit and others officials requesting for an outside independent investigation of the Great Lakes Water Authority response. Many questions have been asked of claim forms and such of how they should be filled out, what we should do with them and at this time. Who should I file my claim with? Please fill out the City PA 222 claim form on Grosse Pointe Park's website. This protects your rights under PA 222, and the city is forwarding these forms to GLWA and DWSD regularly. If you have already completed other forms, please identify any others you have already completed on your city form. This helps the city identify potential duplicates if those entities forward claims form to us. If I file with GLW or DWSD, what should I do? Those entities may provide copies to us. However, their forms may not request all the types of information that are requested on our form. We advise that you still complete a GPP form to make sure that the city is aware of your claim, particularly because PA 222 claims that provides that claim forms must be received within 45 days of the event. Where can you get the form? Forms available at City Hall or city website, the public library, Lavin Center, and the outside gatehouses. What damage should I submit? It is important and crucial that homeowners, renters, car owners, tenants, and others document losses with photos of the flood damage and receipts related to cleaning out your basements and repairs. This includes your personal property that you may have discarded and replaced. Homeowners who have insurance should file a claim with their insurance company immediately. Renters with coverage should do the same and should communicate with their landlord about damages and insurance claims. Car owners should also file with their insurance company. There's been questions about what should we call this event, a flood or a sewer backup. Due to the water coming up from the basement drains, this generally should be classified as a sewer backup. A few properties experience surface water flooding, breaching their structures, and these may be considered a flood. Another section here about the cleanup of your home. Questions that have been asked are, is my basement had water and I'm cleaning up myself? What products or resources should I use? Before I get into here, we are working with a county to provide more muck buckets that are being provided from Wayne County. We had approximately 300 that were distributed, and we're hoping to get more that has essential cleaning supplies and mops and such, N95 masks. So I won't get into all these resources here, but these are some cleanup considerations. We have our city website available with all the following resources for CDC tips for cleaning up, mold, guidance for keeping your kids safe during the cleanup, depart your garden, play equipment, and other tips for your pets, and as well as emergencies. Many questions have been asked about, I hired a contractor to remediate and clean up. Can they dispose of trash at the curb? We are asking in Public Works, due to the amount of trash and pickup, we are asking residents to please consider having contractors haul the material to allow the city and contractors to help with initial flood damage. What are the chances that I will get reimbursed if I take care of these costs up front? Filling out the PA 222 form and documenting will help the city and region plead its case to FEMA for federal relief assistance or through insurance claims. Governor Whitmer has declared a state of emergency for Wayne County, which is the first step to get these events recognized as a federal emergency. One or both of these will hopefully help fund some relief for impacted residents. Does the city have any cleaning supplies for residents? As well, in regards to those muck buckets, are the following items that are in those, and we are hoping to receive more. Another question, is it safe to use my washer and dryer even though they were submerged, but they still work? We would recommend contacting a professional to review your appliances, as they may work but could malfunction and cause severe damage. Parking within the city right now is currently relaxing parking tickets in an effort to allow residents and contractors to freely park close to homes, including on the business districts. We have made available showers that are at the Lavin Center. Residents can use them at the following times located on my screen. Renters have been asking questions about, I haven't heard from my landlord, what should I do? We do have a following contact information if you're having these issues that are below on my screen and available on the city website. And certainly if questions asked or if I need help, who can I reach out to? We do have various resources available on our website for the Red Cross, United Way in the state of Michigan, and a list of those resources are on that following link. In regards to FEMA, what will it mean if we get a federal disaster declaration? FEMA disaster assistance falls into three general categories: individual assistance, which is aid to individuals and households; public assistance, which is aid to public and certain entities for certain emergency disasters; and hazard mitigation assistance, funding for measures designed to reduce future losses to public and private property. Some declarations will provide only individual assistance or only public assistance. Hazard mitigation opportunities are assessed in most situations. For more information, please visit the following link. Is FEMA coming to Grosse Pointe Park? The city is in communication with the Wayne County Emergency Management and our elected officials to host FEMA as they tour the region. At this time, we are expecting that FEMA will be visiting Grosse Pointe Park within the next few days, but we do not have an exact time or location right now from the county. Does the city have an emergency plan for when these things happen? Yes. As required by Wayne County and the state of Michigan Police, in the case of an extreme event that has exhausted the resources of the city, there is a clear line of command for coordinating these extreme events. In this case, the city manager and public safety director act as those coordinators. The emergency plan has been activated to the Wayne County Homeland Security and Emergency Management, as well as those of other communities. If you would like to reach out to your local, state, and federal officials, please contact the following links and or emails, which is of Governor Gretchen Whitmer, our U.S. Senators Debbie Stabenow, Gary Peters, Congressman Brenda Lawrence, Wayne County Commissioner Tim Killeen, Michigan State Senator Adam Holy, Michigan State Representatives Joe Tate, and as well as Mayor Denner and members of our city council if you've got questions or concerns or thoughts. Before I get into my next thing, I would like to ask Chief Gerald and Jim Bostock to give a report from the Public Safety Department of events that occurred and afterwards from Public Safety.
Thank you, Nick. I'm going to turn this portion over to Deputy Chief Bostock.
Jim, I think you're muted. Thank
Is
you.
that better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks,
So from 7 p.m. on Friday, June 25th through 7 a.m. on Saturday, June 26th, public safety responded to a total of 6 fire runs. 2 of them were working fires. 4 of them ended up being smoke in the basement, which were handled by the responding units. By 11 o'clock p.m., many of the streets and intersections were impassable. We lost 1 scout car due to the flood. Another suffered some damage, but is repairable. Officers end up forced to walk through the floods to get to the homes of the residents to get to their calls for service. On many runs, officers were dropped off by our fire trucks so we could get through the high waters. As the city manager said earlier, we implemented our emergency operations plan that was done early on Saturday morning. And that is an all hazards plan to deal with events of natural or human origin. So that was enacted. So how was public safety affected? Dispatch and 911 phones were immediately overwhelmed. Public safety, the building, the basement flooded. We had 4 feet of water in our basement at public safety, which resulted in our 911 and phone systems being crippled. Our dispatch radio consoles were taken offline. Public safety boilers and hot water heaters, battery backups were damaged. And as a result, the public safety and the building itself had no internet or outgoing phone service. So by default, all the 911 calls and the normal phone lines were transferred to Harper Woods Dispatch. On Saturday morning, we transferred all those calls to Grosse Pointe Woods, and we physically dispatched from Grosse Pointe Woods Second Dispatch Center. So we had a dispatcher reporting to Grosse Pointe Woods where they would field the phone calls and work the radio. Later that day on Saturday, radios and phones were partially restored, enough so we could bring our dispatchers back to Grosse Pointe Park. Since the flood, we've had a number of emergency management, homeland security meetings. And as city manager said, during that first meeting, Governor Whitmer declared a state of emergency for Wayne County. And lastly, we've secured and we've passed out to date about 400 of the cleanup kits that we get through Homeland Security that we're working with on securing some more. Any questions? If not, I'll pass it back to Chief Gerald.
Thank you, Jim. I just want the public to know that as with any major event, we will be conducting an after-action review of this incident. We're going to look at what we did well and certainly what we can improve upon going forward. Since my primary responsibility is the safety of our residents, to that end, these are some of the issues that we have identified that will need to be addressed. As Deputy Chief Bostock indicated, our 911, telephones, and internet were significantly impacted by the flooding of the public safety building's basement. So through grants or other potential funding sources such as FEMA, we intend to move all of that equipment to a location at or above ground level so it doesn't happen again. Second, I know there was some concern over perceived lack of emergency notifications. As an organization, we recognize the need to expand our emergency notification systems, and therefore, we will be working with FEMA and other vendors to acquire and implement an integrated public alert and warning system, or IPAWS. While Nixle and other notification platforms rely on end users registering their personal device, IPAWS is a system that will allow 90-character text messages to be pushed to all cell phones and pagers in a geographical area, warning of imminent dangers to life or property. We're also going to be soon creating a registry of non-ambulatory or homebound individuals in our city that may need our assistance in the event of a major disaster, such as a tornado or power outage. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Nick.
Thank you, Chief. My last discussion that I'd like the residents and everybody to know, and I'm sure you're looking to as well, is what is the city looking to do moving forward? City is requesting public utilities such as the Great Lakes Water Authority that handle our sanitary flow need to have external audits of their systems. Number two, We're requesting utilities to have backup plans for power failures. Number 3, as the chief indicated, we are going to update our communication procedures and audit weaknesses for improvement. Number 4, public utilities work with communities on modeling predictions for extreme storm events. So Detroit, the Grosse Pointe, and all municipalities can come up with comprehensive plans for events of this magnitude. Number 5, requests to the federal and state governments need for allowing relief points to communities and investment to city and regional infrastructure. Number 6, continue to leverage EGLE, which is our state environmental office, to allow Grosse Pointe Park relief points in the case of extreme storms. Number 7, consideration of new home builds requiring infrastructure to handle storms that could include backflow, sump pump, basement waterproofing, and etc. Number 8, we're going to continue searching for grant or funding opportunities to improve city infrastructure. Number 9, we're going to continue our downspout disconnection program. Number 10, continue the removal of parking lots and alleys from the city sanitary. And number 11, which is so crucial in this type of event, we need to work with other cities and regional partners on a joint effort to form a committee working in partnership with the Great Lakes Water Authority and regional utilities on audits of their systems and improvements. With that said, this is the end of my FAQ. As we go further into our presentation, the city will be updating this FAQ, especially with your questions that we may not have available or ready for an answer at this time. I'm going to stop my screen and I'm going to turn it over to Patrick Droz, who is our city engineer from OHM Advisors. And Patrick will be giving us a deep dive review of the city's infrastructure.
Thanks, Nick. To get started, we'll do a few slides to just provide an overview of the response to the event on the ground, just with some metrics of what's been done. From the basis of cleanup, which was mentioned earlier, Nick's frequently asked questions section, reports of flooding came in for over 3,000 homes across the city. And in response to that, City DPW has brought in a number of contractors and vehicles to deal with that, and is removing on average now about 156 tons of waste daily. Normal conditions are about 23 tons of that to the scale. This map here shows on the left streets completed, and this is as of today. The streets in orange have been addressed. There's a next round of pickups that will be proposed after the orange streets are completed, which you can see. The city's been segmented into 4 different areas that will allow for methodical second collection of the bulk waste within the community. We'll now go into a technical dive of the 25th and 26th event on a summary basis. Certainly everyone has seen in the media some of the information about the rainfall, but we thought it'd be good to provide a local focus about how that particular rain event affected Grosse Pointe Park. We will also give a high-level overview of the sewer system, how it works, how it's structured, and then how it functioned in the event, and then a brief discussion relative to the Great Lakes Water Authority system to which Grosse Pointe Park discharges. So on the evening of June 25th, the rain event in essence started a little after 8:30 with more of a small rain. But as the day progressed, the evening progressed, the rate quickly grew. And so with this particular event, we ended up having, over the 24-hour period, 8.19 inches of precipitation within the city of Grosse Pointe Park. And the city, as part of upgrades, which we'll talk about a little bit later, has a rain gauge that provides 5-minute data that is streamed to city personnel to get a feel of how quickly it's raining. Probably more significant is that over a 5-hour period, from about 11 p.m. to 4 a.m., in near continuous conditions, the city received 7.33 inches of rain. That equates, when you look at this storm on the whole, to about 25% of the annual precipitation occurring over a 24-hour period, which also translates to, in terms of recurrence interval, which is a term that we use in the engineering field to assess the intensity of storms, of falling over a 1,000-year storm event, multiple occasions.
I'm gonna go in your share. Yeah.
This just shows you in context the event of June 26th on the right, and the annual precipitation. On average, Metro Detroit receives about 33 to 34 inches of rain per year. The next slide, this is a lot of information displayed here, but again, it gives you context. I'll start with the heavy lines that we've highlighted here, and these will become important later in the conversation, but this thick green line at the bottom is what we call the 10-year storm event. And what that essentially means is that any given year, there's a 10% chance that that storm can occur. And that intensity changes over the duration. So a 10-year storm can mean an inch of rain in 15 minutes, or it can mean over 3 inches of rain in 24 hours. And so because that can vary, NOAA prepared an atlas that basically defines precipitation for any given region. And so these lines depict how those precipitation patterns work. We typically, and when I say we, the engineering community, typically designs storm sewer systems in terms of conveyance, which means getting the water into the pipe and flowing it to wherever it needs to go, whether that is a detention pond or the Detroit River. Typically that's designed for what the 10-year event is. The pipes can usually carry more than that, but it goes into what's called a surcharge condition where that water elevation starts to rise. On the wastewater side, there's a slightly higher threshold for design where we push up into the 25-year storm event, which is again, now 25% chance, a 4% chance every year of that event happening. And then on the stormwater management side for managing larger systems, and in our case, if we were to look at the entire system of pumping to Lake St. Clair, for instance, we look at the 100-year. And that's what FEMA also looks at for when they're looking at floodplain determinations. The 100-year is typically one of the key elevations that they'll identify as part of any analysis. And that's no different here in Grosse Pointe Park. What we then plotted on here in these lines are data points from previous events. So we have the 2016 as well as the 2017 event. 2016, there was a flooding condition that was present. 2017, there wasn't. And some of the details of that storm had a lot to do with how long that duration of storm was. There happened to be a break in the 2017 storm where there wasn't as much in the 2016. And so providing a break sometimes gives the system the ability to recover. You can see in some cases, those lines exceeded the 100-year event. In some cases they didn't, and it depended again on the precipitation data. For context, we've plotted the 2021 event here in the red line. And what this shows us is that virtually every portion of the storm, looking at even the smallest interval of time to the largest, exceeded typically at least the 100-year storm event. And once we started getting to a longer duration, we were beginning to exceed the 1,000-year event, and in a very significant amount in many cases, literally off the charts. So the scale of the precipitation is an important thing to keep in context relative to the system itself. A bit of a summary about the sewer systems within Grosse Pointe Park. So there are two systems that are used to manage the sewer needs. And so the wastewater system, which is designed to handle plumbing fixtures from your home. It also, in many cases, will handle footing drains. You happen to have foundation drains. And in some cases, there's still downspouts that are connected. Those are generally tied into the sanitary system. In the city of Grosse Pointe Park, the sanitary system is actually a former combined system With the majority of that getting built between the 1920s and 1940s, there were some later improvements done in the 50s and 60s, but the bulk majority of those were done in the 20s through 40s. In the 1990s, that was converted to a sanitary only system. And that system itself drains to the Jefferson pump station, which is located just by City Hall here at Jefferson in Maryland. That system is composed of 3 pumps. 3 of them handle sanitary sewage, which is for lower flows. That's typically in a dry day. These smaller pumps that are generally about handle what we call 3 cubic feet per second is kind of the unit of measure for those. And then there's the wet weather pumps, which are about 10 times as powerful as that. All of those pumps discharge to GLWA, which is the Great Lakes Water Authority, which conveys the wastewater down to the wastewater treatment plant. And there's a number of systems that'll pass through to get there, but eventually it ends up at the wastewater treatment plant, which is right by the Rouge River near Zug Island. On the stormwater side, as part of a project in the 1990s to separate the community, the stormwater from the streets, sidewalks, driveways, many cases building rooftops and lawn areas, was diverted to a dedicated stormwater system. And that manages runoff via catch basins and conveys those in the sewers that ultimately discharge to a large pump station at Patterson Park. That pump station has 6 large pumps. Those lift the water and then discharge it into Lake St. Clair. The map on the right just shows a graphical depiction of the modeled stormwater system during the 100-year event. And it does show that there are going to be instances of flooding, but it's intended to be very much localized to streets with the focus of trying to keep those off of major streets. So streets like Jefferson, Cadieux are still passable, but there might be some minor flooding, which basically just is a location for that surcharge within the system to basically be temporarily held and then pump back down. Many times that surcharge only happens for a few minutes, and it's at the very peak of a storm event. Relative to the June 2021 event, reviewing the data, every pump functioned at Patterson Park as planned. The pumps ran continuously. The wet well was completely full, which indicates that the storm sewers themselves upstream were also likely full. And then again, given the size of the rain event relative to the design basis, which again for conveyance systems is typically the 10-year event, it was completely overwhelmed and resulted in widespread flooding. And if you were to denote that on the map, it would likely be near any catch basin within the entire city, some being worse than others. On the sanitary sewer system, in the case of this particular event, the pumps all ran as planned. As soon as the rain started at the station, a little before 11 o'clock, the pumps began and ran continuously through the next day to bring the wet well down. Unfortunately, the volume of rain overwhelmed the system and resulted in the situation that resulted in backups within many basements throughout the community. There was an issue with the downstream system that receives the runoff, the wastewater from the pump station at Jefferson. The photo you see on the right is actually the location where Grosse Pointe Park discharges to Great Lakes Water Authority's Detroit River Interceptor. You can see with some of the bubbling here, this is actually surcharge. So the system is pumping, but there's literally nowhere to put the water, and it's cascading down the hill into Maryland Street in this particular photo. There's been much discussion, and Nick mentioned earlier, regarding Great Lakes Water Authority operations. And just to summarize that again, Grosse Pointe Park discharges via pumps to the Great Lakes Water Authority's Detroit River Interceptor. But the ability to pump was hindered by some of the issues with the water surface elevations within the GLWA system. And as evident in that photo, it's evident that there was a surcharge condition that prevented the quick dewatering of the city system in some areas. As noted with the stormwater system that we highlighted on the previous slides, the size of the storm greatly exceeded the basis of design. The system immediately downstream of Grosse Pointe Park is essentially a combined system. So the system that we are pumping into is designed to take all of the stormwater, whereas in Grosse Pointe Park, it's been separated. So the same event that caused problems with our storm sewer system in our community affected the combined system because there's only one system in that particular location. There's some of the issues that was noted by Great Lakes Water Authority and summarized by Nick as well in his frequently asked questions. Several of the pump stations did not operate at full capacity. GLWA has informed the public that they are performing an after event analysis to quantify the operations. However, the city and many other municipalities are pushing for an independent analysis of that. Since 2016, when the last event occurred that resulted in flooding within the community, there were several upgrades that were made at the pumping station. And some of those were essential to allow for this station to function without issue in terms of all pumps running from the moment that they were called for as the wet well levels began to rise. Those included elevating the transformer systems that previously were in harm's way. That's all been elevated, and any sort of non-submersible component that would have been compromised by a flood was also raised in elevation. There was also modernization of the instrumentation and the alarm monitoring, which in this event, shortly after the rain began at 10:50 p.m., calls were made via the automatic system to staff, and folks were on the ground as the event began to ramp up. So having that ability to make that call autonomously is a very helpful tool. And then once in the station, there's the opportunity to operate manually as well, although it can also be operated remotely if need be. There's also significant upgrades made to the pumps, including the purchase of one new pump, as well as two being rebuilt, and the backup power system was fully upgraded. On the collection side, which is the pipes that lead to the pumping station, immediately after the 2016 event, smoke testing, which essentially involves pumping non-hazardous smoke through the sewer system to identify leaks, was used, and identified many sources of inflow and infiltration, which in many cases are either groundwater, but it can also be illicit connections that may remain. So catch basins that were not documented, downspouts, any sort of unknown connection to the sanitary system that should not be there. Those were identified and notifications were sent out regarding those. There was also an evaluation completed of the sewer system for identifying extreme relief options. And those were submitted as concepts to Eagle for their review. In all, the city's spent over nearly $1 million in terms of funding to address the sewer system and improve resiliency for these types of events.
Thank you, Patrick. So before we get into the community comments, I'd like to thank you for your presentation. Certainly, I want to thank everybody for listening, and further, I'd like to give an opportunity to members of the City Council to provide some comments and or thoughts that they have about this event. So I'll go to Mayor Denner first, and then Mayor, if you want to take the lead and go from there to each member of council.
Sure, I will do that. Thanks, Nick. I will defer to my.
Mr. Denner, Mr. Mayor, you're muted yourself.
I unmuted, but I think someone helped me by muting me on top of my unmute. At any rate, I'm going to defer to my colleagues for comment, and I'm going to call them on in no particular order. It was the order that you showed up on my screen earlier in the meeting. So I'll start with Councilmember Fluitt.
Thank you. I do have a couple of things. I'll be brief. I do want to thank residents for being here. I am so sorry for your losses, and I can't imagine what some of you have been through. I want to commend our city employees and especially our DPW because they're working in terrible conditions as well. I felt tonight was very important. I'm glad we've had good turnout because I think we need to hear what our residents have to say. And I wanted to have, for them to have the opportunity to hear from the city manager, to hear the latest updates, and more importantly, to vent if you need to, and to ask us those direct questions that we can hopefully give answers to. When I asked for this meeting, I said, it's okay for us not to have all the answers. We don't have all the answers yet, but I do feel it's important for residents to be able to be heard. So thank you for being here. I'm glad to hear that we're going to join in asking for an investigation as to what happened. I'm glad to see that we've started to identify some short-term and long-term solutions. This is going to be a big job. You know, we found out in April that the sewer separation is not, that project has some gaps. So we need to determine exactly where those are and how many of those there are. And we have to take action. I don't ever need to hear again that this is a 100-year or a 500-year or a 1,000-year event. This is the way the world is now. And we have to figure out as quickly as possible what actions we can take to protect our city. I have no doubt it's going to be big and it's going to be expensive, but we have to determine what we're going to do. Laurie Reed, who is the chair of the communications committee, has already called for a communications meeting so that we can start working on a better emergency communications plan. I am thankful to help with that effort. I think city government itself, not just our DPS, but city government itself needs a comprehensive emergency plan, which I mentioned last year at the beginning of COVID. So I am happy that I will be able to help work on that. Beyond that, I had one resident who wanted me to let everyone know, just to mention to everyone, she works in public health. She wanted to remind everyone, be careful with flies and mosquitoes. You know, they do carry disease. There's an excess of fecal material, obviously right now out on our city streets. So please be mindful of that. She asked me to share that with you. And I will wrap up again by saying thank you for being here. And I'm very sorry for what the city is going through, and please let us know what we can do to help.
Thank you, Councilmember Fluid. We'll go to Mayor Pro Tem Robson.
Thank you, Mayor. My comments will be brief. I thank everybody for being here. Obviously, this is a very difficult time. We're all distressed. This town hall now is to listen to the citizens. I want to thank Mr. Seisland for his presentation and the other officials as well. Please know that all of the city officials, all my colleagues are as active as they can be in response to remediation and helping people. So I'm going to sit here and do what I should do, carefully and sincerely listen to the responses of the citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. Now move to Councilmember Rellin. He may be having, he's been in and out on my screen. He may be having some technical issues. So move to Councilmember McConnell.
Good evening. I too want to commend our city workers for all the hours and hard work, and thank you. Sorry to hear about all the different challenges, but I appreciate the work. And I certainly want to say sorry to residents. You know, as my colleague said, certainly we all want to help in any ways we can. We'll continue to do that. And but I also want to commend and thank the residents, one, for being here, but two, for just being so neighborly. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to who said, you know, whose basement was wiped out, they lost stuff and maybe didn't have insurance to cover it. And they talked about someone who had it worse than them. So that speaks a lot to the type of community that we are. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that and say I appreciate that. I too look forward to putting my background in communications and crisis management to use on the communication plan through the committee. Also, we'll just hope that we can think about, we had that 1.1 million. We had talked about some different ways we may have to pivot as it relates to this event. So I hope that we'll consider that. The other thing I wanted to raise up real quickly is I hope that we will, as a council, have an opportunity to get details about the financial impact and see if we can come back together and find the resources that we need to offset any of the costs here. So I'm going to take a cue from my colleague and sit back and listen. And thanks everyone for being here.
Thank you, Councilmember McConnell. I see that Councilmember Rellin is back with us. Councilmember Rellin, I'll call on you next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm here today as your elected representative, but I'm also here today as an affected resident. In fact, a resident just like many of you who've been the victim of 2 sewage backups in 4.5 years. We had 5 feet two Saturdays ago. In 2016, we had over 3 feet, along with about 250 other homes down here in our area. The lack of response from our previous city manager is what inspired me to follow our local government actions, to attend city council meetings, to speak out and ask questions. And I'm still working on getting answers from that catastrophe, as it was shown that it could have been avoided with some proper infrastructure updating. And there's still some sewer sanitary lines that haven't been completed as we thought they have. One is on Jefferson, right at the base of our street. So I'm going to be following up on that as well. But first off, I really want to thank our city manager and his employees, public safety, and our hardworking DPW crews. They've worked so many hours and did the same heavy lifting for our city that many of us have done for our own homes. I personally witnessed dozens of amazing acts by our DPW crews. I was driving between my house and my parents' house, which is on Buckingham, and to other friends and residents around town, and I can't thank them enough. I actually was able to help the DPW crew for about 3 houses here, and it took us almost an hour. The demeanor these guys had was amazing. I'm forever grateful for their dedication and spirit to help us all, and they're still at it today. So hopefully getting round 1 done by this weekend, as we heard, and thanks to Tom and Pat and Nick for your dedication and guidance for this. This is hard work for our residents as well. This catastrophe has brought an enormous amount of physical labor, mental anguish, property loss, stress, unexpected financial burdens, just to name a few. For many of us, these are not just basement things. These are our memories, our family memories, spaces where we gathered with our kids and things like that. And you drive around and see these piles of shit covered stuff that just sucks. So I feel deeply for you all. On day 1, I was inspired by a friend who came over with a pump without even asking. On day 2, I had 2 close friends come help me dive into our shit covered basement and start removing its contents in its entirety. Their compassion fueled me to do what I could. Council wasn't able to meet and come up with planning. So I traveled around, talked to hundreds of you, trying to share resources of pumps and fans, everyone we could reach. So many people helped in and dove in when we asked for resources, carrying out soggy stuff, ripping out cabinets. It just goes on for what our residents have been doing for each other. My wife and I even tried to lift the spirits of many of our affected residents with just driving around with a cooler of beer and a bag of candy. This gave us the ability to give the kids a distraction from the parents for a little while, and allowed us to really get that human feeling of giving a hug to so many of you. We tried to share every resource we could manage, and I couldn't have made it through without my wife and my friends. And I can't imagine what some of you had to go through on your own. We witnessed so many of our residents step up to help each other through to this point. This is the remarkable thing about our community. We have some of the most amazing and generous people. Last time we made some great friendships, and this time we made more. We need to identify our city manager's actions that were impactful and efficient and build off of it. But we also need to analyze our inadequacies and areas for improvement so that we're better prepared for any future emergencies. I've spoken to many of you already about this and look forward to your comments and suggestions tonight and in the near future. I have a huge dry erase board full of comments and suggestions already, building what I like to call a playbook that I'll be sharing with our administration once I add more of my notes. Some concepts are built around communications, best practices, health info, established ethical contractors that can agree not to take advantage of our residents during these kind of times, established list of expanded resources from local, out of county, and even out of state, such as Nick mentioned. A playbook or emergency action plan can help us with all this and make us efficient. I've heard those words today, so that's good to hear. I'm dedicated to making sure we assess and explore all infrastructure systems and engineering recommendations to prevent future catastrophes. And all the items identified by the city manager are a great start to a long-term fix in our contingency plan. And I also look forward to hearing from all of you with your thoughts and suggestions. And again, I thank our city staff, public safety, our DPW crews, and I truly am sorry so many of you are enduring this as well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Rowland. We'll move on to Councilmember Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'm going to try to be brief because this meeting is about the residents. We have about 250 residents on Zoom and another 100 plus on Facebook. I've been talking and visiting with many of you. And I know that residents want answers. They want solutions. They want help. I learned just tonight that the storm affected 3,000 homes. Previously, it was 2,500. We have 4,200 basements in our city, so it's the overwhelming majority. This is many times more than the 2016 flood, and the financial impact is still being tallied. It will be large. It will be huge, and it will be largely borne by the residents and felt for many years. This is not sustainable, and we should not have to live like this. My family and I were impacted in both storm events. On Saturday morning, after I assessed my own situation, I went out to the neighborhoods. And as I was walking and witnessing the devastation, I contacted Senator Adam Ollier and Representative Joe Tate and asked them to have the governor declare a state of emergency, which they did. We're operating under that. And I'm still asking for any and all resources available to our residents. This is a core function of city government, delivering water and sewer services. So I applaud that we're asking for an audit of Great Lakes Water Authority, but we need to demand a regional fix, and I'm glad to see that in the city manager's next action steps. I am going to request a standing council agenda item on water infrastructure for the foreseeable future. That this should be our #1 priority as a city and as a region, and that we also ask for and establish a separate task force that meets on a regular basis devoted solely to our water infrastructure. And we need to do more than talk about it. We need action. And then secondly, and it's been said, emergency communications and disaster planning. These are also core functions of government, and we have some work to do there as well. I hope that we never experience a disaster of this magnitude again, but we must have emergency plans and contingencies in place. Those will be my focus, the water infrastructure and our emergency planning. And I look forward to hearing from the residents. And of course, I thank the city employees, especially DPW and public safety, for their efforts. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Reed. And finally, Councilmember Hodges.
Thank you, Mayor Denner, and thank you to the administration and to our contractors who work so hard, our community as well. Not only was the work being done, but it was being...
I'm sorry, let me interrupt. There's a big echo and it's almost like you've got 2 audio sources going. I can hear you, but there is an echo in case you happen to have to.
I do not.
Okay.
Everything is normal on my end.
Okay, go.
I could log in and log back out if it's that annoying. I cannot hear the echo on my end either.
Okay, go ahead. We can understand you. I just thought.
Okay. I will keep it brief. Many of the stories I've heard is not only was the work being done, but it was being done with a smile, and that's the SAP, because this community always stands up. And I also would like to thank the community for its understanding. It was very challenging for me because knowing all the suffering that was going on at home, we were out of town dealing with a family health emergency and I was completely out of touch as a result. So thank you for that understanding. I think most importantly, we need to show the community it is in good hands through well-managed action that is focused, well-resourced, and accountable. We need to leverage every resource and support our administration in getting to the solutions that are necessary. Some of that is already underway. I know I've been working with our city manager to link to neighboring agencies and support his efforts, looking at what the global fix might be, how we might create a parallel advisory group, something to the perhaps calling it the Detroit River Watershed that would allow us to leverage resources at other levels of government, and working collaboratively to apply strategic pressure to the GLWA and using other agencies to get us there. There's also an effort underway with Healthy Urban Waters, and we can learn from other disasters that have occurred throughout the country as well. So I look forward to continuing that work because I think, and I know all of you share that desire and that will, and it's important for us to roll those sleeves up and dedicate the resources that are necessary to take this from the word stage and move it to the action stage and get the solutions in place that we are entitled to, that each of our residents and taxpayers are entitled to. So thank you again to our team for showing that willingness to act in the same ilk, and know that I look forward to being an important part of that solution as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Hodges. I'm not going to try and repeat the sentiments that were offered by my colleagues. They were excellent, and I appreciate your comments. There are three themes that I get out of this. In the short term, it's very clear that the quality of our city's team was exceptional and hardworking, and I really thank them from top to bottom in their efforts to serve our residents. Second, it was obvious that we've got a great community that we live in, and the spirit of our community came through, as was mentioned, helping each other, helping your neighbors. And that makes me proud to be in Grosse Pointe Park. And then finally, we all know that there are things that we need to do, and there'll be improvements going forward as we learn from what just happened to us and focus our resources going forward. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to the administration so that we can hear from our residents.
Thank you, Mayor Denner and members of City Council. I appreciate your comments and thoughts. Now we're going to move into the community's comments. So I'm going to go ahead and establish a couple ground rules, if you don't mind. Members of the public wishing to make a comment, they'll need to utilize the raise hand function in the Zoom app, as some of you have done, or press *9 on your telephone keypad. Public participants will be added to the queue list in the order their hand was raised and will be called upon by Assistant to the City Manager, Leah Smith. They'll be called in that order. As well, we're looking to, if you could please keep with the amount of public we have available tonight, to one question or comment. If you could keep your comment or question to about 3 minutes. As well, the city staff will do as best as possible to answer your questions. If we do not have all the information and cannot provide an answer, we will do our best to be posting that later onto our city website in the updated FAQ sheet. So with that said, excuse me, I got a vacuum behind me. Sorry about that. I will let Leah take it away to our first public comment.
Thank you, City Manager Seisland. One other thing that I want to add is we are asking the public to also keep their webcams off, even when you are speaking and making a comment. So the first person in the queue is Victoria. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself, please.
Hi.
And if you would please, yes, go ahead.
Okay. So yeah, this is great. I'm happy to be here, but while this presentation was going on and all of you were speaking, a lot of us in Grosse Pointe Park just got flooded out again. I currently have about 3 or 4 inches of water back in my basement. I threw it up on Facebook. I contacted neighbors. The neighbors that have gotten back to me have also said that they have water in their basements. A bunch of people on the Facebook group are saying they have water in their basements. Our streets are flooded again. This all seems very smoke and mirrors to me. I mean, I just paid almost nearly $6,000 to get my basement dry, sanitized, and everything removed. And now I have to do it all over again. Can someone explain why this is happening? Because the data that I just saw does not reflect what is currently happening right now.
Victoria, thank you for your comments. I'm so sorry to hear about this. If you could please email our Public Works Supervisor and our Assistant Supervisor, they surely will go ahead and get a hold of you to take a look at the concern. If you could please provide your name, address, phone number, they'll get back to you. Their information is thomasp@grosspointpark.org and Jenny T, that's spelled JENNYT @grosspointpark.org. Thank you. Leah, next comment.
The next person in the queue is Katie Bossler. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself, please.
Thank you.
And please go ahead.
I agree with Victoria. During this council meeting, my street at 1027 Lake Point has 12 inches of water. Myself and my tenants all had cars totaled 2 weeks ago. And so I'm just terrified of that again. And secondly, since that was already addressed, I'm wondering what the city is doing to understand what was in the water in our basements. I have followed a bleach protocol and had Stanley Steamer come out, but other citizens have paid thousands and thousands for restoration companies to do multiple cleaning processes. Do we know what's necessary in order to keep our basements clean?
Katie, thank you for your comments. Within this FAQ that was provided, we do have relevant information in regards to safe cleaning practices. So I would encourage you to please visit our city website and follow those links within the FAQ. Thank you.
Helena, you are next. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself, please. And please go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you so much for holding this town meeting and allowing us to speak. My I guess comment is really related to like emergency preparedness and communications. I was encouraged to hear Councilman Fluid say that she is going to work on an emergency communications plan. I wanted to ask to see if the city has any emergency plans currently in place. I will reflect upon my own experience in healthcare, in which we have incident command centers at the ready to address any emergency that could take a toll on the healthcare system. For example, during the height of COVID, we had the Incident Command Center set up on a 24/7 basis to evaluate how COVID would impact the operations of the hospital system as a whole and to look at hospital resources. So I'm wondering whether or not the city has something like that in place, not just for this particular incident, but for any incident that could impact the city and overwhelm the city's resources. Clearly, the DPW workers are very overwhelmed with the amount of debris that's in the streets that needs to be picked up. And I'm sure they would appreciate additional resources to help them through the situation. So that's really kind of my question and my comment.
Elena, well, thank you for your question and comment. Myself and Deputy Chief Jim Bostic, as part of our, throughout this event, we do have a emergency operations plan that is required by Wayne County Emergency Management, Homeland Security, as well as through the Michigan State Police, that is submitted on a 3-year basis. So our last one was submitted in 2019 and still reflects right now. As part of this process and seeing that our resources were being overwhelmed, we activated this resource in asking Wayne County Emergency Management for help and Homeland Security, as well as other communities within the region that have asked for this help. I'll let Deputy Chief Bostic or Chief Gerald comment if there's any further on that comment.
No, I have nothing further. Usually in a implementation of an emergency action plan, you have things in place where you can contact other contractors or bring in other resources to help mitigate a disaster. In this case, it was so widespread, we had no other resources that we could call on.
Thank you, Director. Next question, please, or comment.
The next person in the queue is Angel 911 Restoration. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself. And please go
Hello,
ahead.
everybody. Hi, everybody. This is Angel Colmenares from 911 Restoration. And we've been servicing this area since day one. And we want to offer you guys and residents of this community free inspections. Please look for us, Google 911 Restoration Detroit, and we're gonna be able to help you guys for free. And I understand that, you know, Victoria just got flooded again. We were trying to be as thorough as we can and offer you the best comprehensive assessment on your basement and what you can do to minimize future, you know, recurrence. Obviously, that's going to be part of the city management on the sewage. But again, we're trying to do our best. We've got over 1,000 calls along the Grosse Pointe community and surroundings. It was just overwhelming, but we were doing our best as a contractor. We are certified firm and individuals. We're here to help you guys. And again, this is going to be a free inspection. Please look for us. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person in the queue is Matt Call. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself. And please go ahead.
Thank you for the great presentation so far. Shout out to Patrick Droz. I thought your section was great. I have one question and an associated comment. Has there been any commonality found for houses that experienced high water levels and versus houses that experienced low or no water levels? That's something I've been asking a lot of my neighbors about and trying to get a sense for, you know, who has what sort of setup that helps them, or they got installed since 2016 or whatever. I haven't been able to find a commonality myself. And just a suggestion that individual homeowner recommendations and or assistance for citizens of the city looking to protect their homes, I think would be appreciated in general. If there were citywide assistance for people protecting their homes and or citywide recommendations for people to protect their homes, that would, you know, give me a real sense of direction on where I should be spending my money to protect myself in the future. Thank you.
Patrick Droz, our city engineer or public works, any comment to Matt's question?
I'll take the first part, Nick. Relative to the variation in flooding depths, the sewer network is a fairly complex system that generally speaking, you would think everything would flow one way, but the way the community was developed, there's actually kind of localized low points that find themselves throughout the community. So it's not always intuitive that the sewer is going downhill just because the street's going downhill. So I guess my answer to that question is that it does vary a little bit based on the elevation of the sewer and proximity to your basement. And every home finished floor elevation is slightly different. So, you know, the term water finds its level is at play here. If your house is, say, a little bit higher than your neighbors, that could affect it. There's also realities of just the pressure of how much water is pushing through. If your lead is smaller than the neighbors, it's potential that you have root growth. There's a lot of factors that can affect that. And that's part of you know, some of the information we gather to try to calibrate models to figure out how the systems really work. That data is actually helpful as part of that more technical analysis. On the idea about what can be done at the home basis, I'm going to say a couple of things and then pass it to Pat and Tom. But generally speaking, you know, some things that are talked about are things like check valves. Those are things that we can get put in. We can also do a lot to help ourselves out as a community. That if we're doing projects that are going to be paving more driveway or doing addition, to make sure that our runoff is managed. Doing everything we can to try to reduce the impact. So even small things like rain barrels and impervious pavements, that stuff all adds up. We all see that there is a absolute reality that storms are getting more intense and more frequent. And it's going to take a very collaborated and a big effort to be able to brace for these storms going forward. But even at the scale of doing a thing on your home, just thinking about stormwater management within your own property is going to make it easier for everybody. Nat or Tom, want you to talk about the check valves or sump pumps?
Yeah, as far as check valves in the home, as far as check valves in the home, it's not a bad idea. It will help. The thing with that is you will have to put a sump pump pit inside the home also. Just for the fact is that you do have weeping tiles around the house that generally will get water in there no matter what. Along with downspouts, if you do have them connected, please disconnect those. That is crucial as far as when rain, especially with the type of rain that we're getting nowadays. And with those disconnected, water shedding away from the house is very important. You could have low areas in the, right around the house, which could also cause puddling, and then eventually get down into the weeping tiles and again, cause issues. Things should be looked at depending upon how old your home is. A lot of times they have 2 tracks in there versus 1. Again, what Patrick was saying as far as backup and everything else, elevation is definitely key. And sometimes tracks do help in a way to keep the water from coming in so quickly. So again, with the backwater valves is important. And if that's what you're looking for, also you would have to include a sump pump with that in order to get the residual water that comes in through the weeping tiles out.
Thank you. The next person in the queue is Natasha Silber. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself. And please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Natasha Fernandez Silber. I live on Beaconsfield, south of Jefferson. I'm a class action attorney. I'm honestly flabbergasted by the over hour-long presentation you all just gave. It's almost detached from reality. You're talking about, you're patting each other on the back. You're talking about residents smiling, being in great spirits. None of my neighbors are smiling. We're all facing $20,000, $30,000 of damage. And you're talking about buckets you're gonna hand out. I mean, it's frankly, it's astonishing. There was nothing to be proud of that happened at the city government. This was a catastrophic failure. The city manager's performance needs to be evaluated. There needs to be accountability. Excuse me? Okay.
Please continue.
Yes, this was a top to bottom failure that has caused catastrophic financial damage for people, health effects, mental health effects. I too was just flooded again for the second time. Cars on my street on Beaconsfield probably are filled with water right now. I put all the stuff from my basement into my garage. Now my garage is flooded because the drains don't work in our alley. So basically nothing that has been said is reassuring at all. Somebody said we had I took notes. In 2016, we had a 100-year event. In 2017, we had a 100-year event. In 2021, we had a 1,000-year event. These are not real numbers. These are not 1,000-year events. This is climate change. I haven't heard the term climate change at all. And I would like to know, among other things, if the city has any intention of doing a comprehensive climate change assessment going forward. I feel flabbergasted because something just happened in 2016. Have there ever been answers? Why, you talk about things you're going to do going forward. Why weren't they already done after what happened in 2016? It doesn't make any sense. My specific question is about the Great Lakes Water Authority. Who is in control of the Great Lakes Water Authority? Does our city have access to it? What information exactly do we have on a regular basis? And what information can we hope to have access to going forward? Because the assessment that somebody gave was that the pumps failed. Okay, we know why the pumps failed. The question is why. And I would like to know specifically what control the points have over that facility.
I'll take that question on Great Lakes Water Authority. It is a regional authority, and it's comprised of voting members from City of Detroit, as well as each of the county as a member, as well as a state appointed representative. Those are all as part of public meetings that will happen, I think, on a monthly basis. So those are opportunities for the public to be heard at those meetings, as well as directly to the representation. The website for the Great Lakes Water Authority is glwater.org. And there you can find information on Wayne County's representatives.
Thank you. The next person in the queue is Patty. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself.
Hi,
And please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I do appreciate the efforts of the community and the opportunity to speak. I also appreciate the prior public comment regarding climate change. I know that that you've outlined a number of action items that we've identified, which is a good indication of progress, but generally speaking, and you're hearing this over and over again, this is not sustainable. I know that we're currently undertaking a community master plan, but I'd like to know if this includes a community resilience review for a comprehensive and distributed approach to resilience, particularly for our infrastructure. Also, just to comment on Patrick Drose's commentary regarding what each individual residents can do relative to stormwater management. I am an architect, so all of what you said makes a lot of sense to me. I get it, but I don't know that the rest of the public actually understand what it takes to do these things. So I think some guidance from our public officials would be beneficial. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment and question. Certainly, we are working with our city master plan consultant, MKSK, right now, as well as OHM Advisors has been contacted by MKSK, and it's certainly a discussion about community infrastructure and resiliency that's being discussed at the master plan level. So I do appreciate that, and I will follow up on our FAQ to ensure that that is part of that process. So thank you.
Thank you. The next person in the queue is Joe Gleason. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself. And please go ahead.
Hi, and thank you. First, the community itself, everyone's kindness with each other has been awesome. So that's such a gem in this mess. Two, and I'll keep this to the point, in Windsor, they were struggling repeatedly with flooding of homes and basements, just as we are now and will likely for a while. They put in a program to subsidize basement owners to put in sump pumps and backstops at the main drain. Putting corks at the floor drain will break the floor pipes and weaken the footings around the house. And so I asked council to seriously consider that, which would, if we do that right, it would streamline the cost. It would put in backup mechanisms for when the drains do become overloaded again. And we can do that right in a way that's environmentally safe and do it in a way that's financially efficient if we streamline those going in. And three, the separation of storm sewer. We ran those smoke tests a while ago, which should have flushed out. Under that test, we would have saw smoke coming up out of the streets. And my concern is we're still, even today, mixing stormwater with sewer water. And how much of that, when we found out, did we alert Detroit that we would be sending the equivalent of millions of toilet flushes per minute heading their way? And if they couldn't handle it, did we put in place some kind of notification to the community residents that this risk was out there? And what are we doing immediately to fix that? That's it for me.
Joe, so thank you for your question. I'll try and answer as best as possible. So, you know, as identified, there are certain areas throughout the city, specifically on, you know, in some of the alleys that due to utilities that are in the way, they were not separated as part of the combined sewer. OHM Advisors as well is working through our system right now to identify any other areas. Previously with the smoke testing that was identifying areas of illicit connections, that as we're working through, and whether it's a certificate of occupancy or identification that there's been an issue, the homeowner is notified that they need to disconnect from the sanitary system. Joe, you had one other question or comment. Do you mind repeating it? I apologize. I think I might
And the
answer
question
that.
was,
Oh, sorry.
in Windsor, Ontario, where basements were flooding on a regular basis, the municipality realized they wouldn't be able to put in the drainage systems to accommodate or guarantee the stop flooding. So they put in a subsidy program to streamline people putting in backstops into their basement drains at the main storm line, as well as sump pump systems to keep their basements dry. Because I think the reality is Grosse Pointe Park's not going to be able to say their drain systems can handle this. And we want to keep the water out of the basements. I'm just asking the municipality to seriously consider streamlining the installation of backstops and pumps so people aren't freewheeling it. If we do this properly, we can do it low cost and environmentally correct.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. The next person in the queue is Martin. If I can ask you to unmute yourself, please. And please
Hi
go
there.
ahead.
Hi there. I have a relative that lives on the 1100 block of Weyburn, next to a house that has been vacant for the past couple of years. Some company based in St. Clair Shores bought it with the intention of flipping it, I presume, but no work has been done and it sits empty. Since the storm, the only people to come to the house was a landscaping crew to cut the grass. No remediation has been done. God only knows what's in the house's basement right now, or the basements of other vacant houses in the park. Mold could be growing, there could be sewage, could be a huge health hazard. My questions are, what has the city been doing over the past couple of weeks since the storm to address this issue? Have they been reaching out to the owners of vacant properties to make sure that something's being done? And what is the plan as it relates to those properties going forward? Thanks.
Martin, thank you for your question. So the first thing I would ask is that if there is any concern in that case, absolutely to please email the building department at building@grossepointepark.org. We do have contact information that we're hopefully able to try and get a hold of the owner or relative, whether they're out of town or somewhere. So I'd absolutely ask you to do that. And as well throughout the next coming weeks and days, you know, that's something that if that's brought to our attention, we'll do what we can with our communication for reaching out.
Thank you. The next person in the queue is Mark Corneille, or I apologize if I said your name wrong. If you can please go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank the city workers for what they've done, and commend the council for what they said they plan on doing in the future. My main concern, though, is that we get past this point, they find that there were real problems at the Great Lakes Water Authority, and that we assume the situation is resolved and we move forward without taking additional action. Mr. Droz pointed out the various floods since 2016, but I'll point out that in 2014, there was a 500-year rain. In 2011, I think it was a 100-year rain. I live on Bedford. We've flooded, our basement has flooded 5 times in the last 10 years. we have to work on the assumption that this is going to happen again. And we have to assume that there are problems that are going to prop up in the future to cause basements to back up that we haven't discovered yet. We just have to work tirelessly to go over the entire system, both mechanically and as far as procedures, et cetera, to make sure this doesn't happen again. That's it. Thank you.
The next person in the queue is Barbara. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself. And please go ahead.
Thank you. I would first like to say thank you for all the people who were part of my network that got me to the point that I am. They are my family, 911 Restoration, S&J Professional Home Care, Anytime Plumbing, Socorro Metals, DTE, the electricians, and the handyman. Like Natasha, I keep asking myself during this time if I'm living in the same city as you are. I live right behind city building. Before this meeting happened, there was a tremendous downpour. I went to make sure my sump pump was working. I looked out from the balcony and I could see from the top of Lake Point to about 10:35, Lake Point completely flooded, almost to the same level that it was that Saturday when I first went out on that morning. You keep talking like it's going to happen down the road. It already happened now. It already happened last night when we had a similar kind of rain pour. The answers that I'm hearing tonight are very passive. I've been proceeding with my own writing campaign to the governor, to the different congressmen, and the governor's response to me was that she has taken this seriously, that we have been declared an emergent state, a disaster area, and I hear from tonight that we're going to wait. Are there meetings every night with Governor Whitmore to tell her exactly where we stand as a community? Are there updates so that she is aware? Are pictures being taken of households? Are the councilmen and the public safety officers walking street by street to identify what the status of each of these residents is? The gentleman who provided the map of Lake Point, every night I look to see when my garbage is going to be picked up. And according to your map, it was. I can tell you, sir, that on June 28th, when my basement was taken of all of its contents, there lies that same set of contents plus what 911 Restoration took in addition, because they determined that a pail of water and bleach is not sufficient. They determined that even with one full desanitation done by S&J, that would be not enough to kill the E. coli that still resides in the basement. So for all of you who are saying a bucket with certain kinds of sanitation is sufficient, you are not telling the truth. What are your efforts to connect with infection control? Today, my series of phone calls was to St. John and to Beaumont. And within an hour of contacting St. John, I had a return call from President Grady's office telling me he took the concerns seriously. And he was already networking with his advocacy groups to find out what could be done, because any infection, any disease, any wrongful death that occurs from this incident is going to also impact an already overwhelmed healthcare system, being Beaumont and St. John. You need to stop with your passive answers. You know that the majority of this community is made up of households that the homeowner does not reside there, but tenants do. Right next to me is a couple. The woman is a student at Wayne in her 4th year, and the young man is a significant other of professional standing. From what I can tell and what she told me on Sunday is that there was one pail of water going into that household with some bleach, and they thought it was a done deal. You know that's not true. So the gentleman who spoke about the condemned house next door to him, What is the city's plan to make sure that all of our homes have been looked at from an electrical standpoint, a plumbing standpoint, and an infection control standpoint? And for those homes that have tenants in them, what are you doing as city government to protect not only the home, but the tenants? And what are you going to do to protect those ignorant tenants where those homes get flipped and they have not been properly taken care of? The other day, my lights were flickering, all after all the things that I had done. It turned out to be an outside program, a problem, outside problem. I called DTE. They were here within hours. They were checking all the circuits in the neighborhood. Where is the DTE command to go street by street to make sure that there are not going to be any fires and that our home and neighborhoods are protected? I have been in contact with all of the city of Grosse Pointe leadership, as has my brother, Richard, who has been of great help to me. We are lucky. Many people do not have the same resources. What are you doing to protect those people? Right now, it's my bank account, my credit cards that are being used to float you. You need to have constant meetings with the governor. You need to make sure that FEMA is here tomorrow in order to protect this community, the people who are alive today, the people who will be alive next year, and the people who to come generations from now for your bloody next 100-year flood. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person in the queue is Jay Haslow. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself. And please go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much. I just had one suggestion, you guys. Whatever long-term solution Grosse Pointe Park comes up with has to be under the complete control of Grosse Pointe Park. We cannot allow it to be under the control of the Great Lakes Water Authority, who has to serve many different communities and really won't be accountable completely to the residents of Grosse Pointe Park. So my only comment is, whatever solution we come up with has to be under our complete control. That's it.
Thank you. The next person in the queue is Daniel Walls. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself. And please go ahead.
Hi, this is actually Debbie Walls, Dan's wife. We have both been listening very attentively to everything that's gone on, and we too appreciate you having this meeting and hearing out the citizens. We are very proud Grosse Pointe Park citizens, and we're also extraordinarily frustrated. Like many others have mentioned, we have gone through 3 floods already within 10 years. We have tried so many different solutions and paid for so many plumbing devices and had our gutters redone and our sewer line cleaned out umpteen times with camera scopes. We have exhausted a long, long list of trying to prevent this from happening. And we're just frankly tired and frustrated. We've torn out our basement twice. We will likely do it again. We, like many others have stated, we need to know what is going to be done going forward. We too do not want to hear one more word about 50-year events, 100-year events, 500-year events, because it seems like it's now, I don't know, yearly events, weekly events. We need answers, and we need some very specific solutions of what we as homeowners can do right now to try to prevent this from ever happening again. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person in the queue is Charles. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself.
Okay.
And please go ahead.
All right. I think actually most of my question was already answered about installing perhaps backwater valves and or sump pumps. I guess I was under the impression or had heard that those were not legal, but now it sounds as though that's something that the city is recommending that people do. So any information that the city can put out about that, I think would be helpful. And I would hope that the state would come and help out a lot with this situation, as well as the federal government. I know Governor Whitmer was on the television just a week or two ago, or maybe 3 weeks now before the flood, saying what surplus the state had because of the COVID situation over the years. Well, maybe it's time to share some of that with those of us that have been impacted by this. That's all my comment.
Thank you. The next person in the queue is Daniel Gwynn. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself. And please go ahead.
Thank you. I live on Bedford, and the first thing I want to say is that the map that someone put up that said that Bedford is cleared is not correct. There is still debris on Bedford. You know, one of the problems was that the volume of trash that had to be thrown out, there was no way that people could get it done in time. There was no one to help. There was no contractors that were available. They were all booked. Right across the street from me, it's been sitting there since the weekend. Down the block from me, the same thing. So the map that says that these streets are cleared is incorrect, and they aren't going to be cleared for several days, if not weeks, because the damage and destruction is so voluminous. Secondly, I also echo the comments of other residents that say, I don't want to hear another word about 100-year, 1,000-year, 500-year. Forget it. This has happened over and over. It's happening now. That is just an excuse. I don't believe it. I reject it. So I don't want to hear from the city government about 1,000, 100, 500, what have you. I'm exhausted. I've been working nonstop trying to clean out my basement. The next point I'd like to make is, you know, the form that, you know, I have the 222 form, and some of the questions on there, some are offensive to me. I mean, have I done basement waterproofing? I want to know what basement waterproofing would have done to prevent sewage water from shooting up the drain into my basement, destroying my furnace, my dehumidifier, my washer, my dryer, and my freezer. Every appliance is ruined. So telling me that I need to waterproof the basement is going to do nothing. I'm not a plumber, but I also question whether a sump pump is going to stop water from spewing up out of the sewer system, when I've already heard that there was nowhere for it to go. And I don't feel like I have to spend thousands more dollars than I've already spent. I'm already past like the $7,000 mark. And I have, in addition to that, I have a wall that's collapsing because of the water receding. And finally, I'm dissatisfied with the answer of the city's participation in the Great Lakes Water Authority. What I would like to know is the city of Grosse Pointe Park going to sue the water authority? They should. It's in our interest. If Grosse Pointe Park isn't the cause of the problem, but the Great Lakes Water Authority is, then there's a city attorney here on the Zoom call. she should be preparing a complaint to sue the city and get us some relief in the form of monetary relief. And, I'll just add that, again, none of my neighbors are smiling. None of them are laughing. None of them think this is funny, and I don't either. Thank you.
Daniel, I'm going to have our DPW supervisor, Tom Jenny, answer your question about Bedford and rubbish pickup.
Yes, Daniel, that map just indicates we've been down the streets one time. That does not indicate that we are clear of anything. It's just that the city is going through one time on that street. So hope that helps answer part of the question you have.
Thank you. Just to clarify for everyone in the queue, we are asking everybody to limit their statement to one question or one comment. So the next person in the queue is Sarah Boyd. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself. And please go ahead.
Good evening, everybody. This, unfortunately, it is going to be more than one question and one comment because that's what it calls for. That's what the situation calls for. First of all, thank you to Laurie Reed, who is going to put a standing water agenda item on the city council bulletin. That's absolutely necessary. Second of all, there needs to be responsibility held for the landlords who are not responding. I am speaking on behalf of my neighbor. She does not have the ability to join on Zoom because she does not have technology. However, her apartment on Hampton has no hot water, no water at all, and does not have a washer or dryer functioning, and her landlord is not responding. I do not know what services to get for her, but I'm speaking on behalf of her at this time. Thirdly, when the Department of Public Works spoke and gave their recommendations, it was extremely hard to hear because they had 2 microphones unmuted. So I'm asking for them to speak again. What are the recommendations? I'm getting so many different answers. Sump pump, yeah, yes. Backwater valve, yes. Not a sump pump, not a backwater. I need to hear what is that recommendation because we could not hear you the first time because there were 2 microphones unmuted. Finally, I need to hear, and I will get back in line if I don't hear, but I need, and if I need to get back in line, I can. But I need to hear what exactly is dysfunctioning that causes our streets to flood. Hampton Street was completely flooded at 6 p.m. tonight. I waited out there in 12 inches of water. I touched the grate. There was nothing covering it. I tried to pull any debris off of it. Nothing could be pulled off. So again, what is causing that plumbing issue to, maybe the city engineer can answer this. What is dysfunctioning that causes our street to flood? Second of all, what is the recommendation from Public Works? Thank you.
Sarah, thank you for your comments and questions. Regarding your first in relation to landlords and tenants, the city does have some information available within this FAQ for resources for those for your neighbors, so they can certainly look to this. If they cannot, we do have available paper copies with phone numbers available at City Hall. I'm going to turn it over real quick to Tom, Jenny, and Pat Thomas to discuss the resources, and then afterwards, real quick, I'll have Pat Droz discuss at Hampton and Maryland.
Yes, sir. First question, you were relating that to backwater valve.
Yeah, she was.
And as far as backwater valves, the way they work, like I said, it definitely have to put 2 of those in there. And you definitely would need a sump pump also to catch all residual water from around the home. That's basically how that would work. Water would be pumped out of the house.
And relative to the question regarding the surcharge condition at Maryland Street, that could be a localized issue. Certainly with the storm of a few days ago, there was, in addition to all the water, there was potentially debris that was brought into the system as well. So things do happen within pipes every now and then. So it's just something we'll have to evaluate and get eyes on it. It could be a localized blockage. That's part of maintaining a system like this, is documenting when there are problems and then doing the follow-up is part of a kind of routine maintenance program, which the city does. But certainly after an event of the magnitude that the city DPW has worked through, the focus has really been, I think, first and foremost, getting the water down and then getting to the cleanup. So it's just something that, you know, we'll just have to keep an eye on it and you know, if there are blockages, to get those dealt with so that the traffic can be maintained.
Thank you. The next person in the queue is Anna Buma. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself. And please go ahead.
Hi, I had basically two comments. As a city that is technically separated, when we got to the point that we understood that the system couldn't handle the volume of water, why were we not dumping stormwater into the Detroit River? And second, seeing the presentation earlier, I'm discovering that now my street is basically a designated flood zone. I'm a little concerned about how that overall addresses future insurance risk, my ability to get insurance, the fact that we have pretty regularly have a flooding issue and a reputation for flooding, and how that affects property values.
Anna, thank you. So I'll take this in two parts, and then I'll have Patrick Droz help me as well. Certainly, if you could let myself know in our Public Works Department of your address and such, we'll identify if whether or not you are within that FEMA floodplain, and we can certainly provide you with resources and information there. And then I'll have Patrick speak to relief options for the city.
So some of the things that were done since 2016, one of the things that was highlighted is what we're calling a resiliency evaluation. As was mentioned by a few folks in different questions and discussion about the apparent increase in a lot of these events that really are starting to push off the chart, the city has been, especially after 2016, looking at ways to provide, with the city having full autonomy, the ability to manage these extreme events. And so that looked at the potential of, you know, discharging to existing storm systems or finding ways to get water out of the system more quickly. Those were done under the purview of some of the requirements that Eagle is going to have about not discharging to surface water. The reality is that there comes a point in time where public health balances the public health of the community with the negative effects of having basement backups with the natural systems. And so Eagle, when given that parameter to make a decision on, is going to favor that we need to get that water out of the system. So I think as part of future efforts, working as a community with our own autonomy in mind, that's one perspective. Also, as part of what the Great Lakes Water Authority is doing with their regional sewer master plan, which just came out earlier this year, they're recognizing climate change is something they have to plan for. And so looking at locations, not only for the regional system to have relief, but also with local communities. So going forward, that's going to continue to be something that we're going to push. And these events give us leverage to kind of identify that this is not something that is a one-time thing. It's happening more often, and we got to be serious about what those solutions are to make sure that these things don't keep happening.
Thank you. Next person in the queue is Jim Muir. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself. And
Thank
please
you.
go ahead.
Thank you. I joined late and I apologize if I'm asking a question that was already addressed, but I guess my question is, we paid to have a system that was separated, and why, it's my understanding that there's still some cross connection between the sanitary and the storm. Can you explain why that is and what needs to be done to separate that? Connected anywhere is connected everywhere, which we've all witnessed. And I guess I'd like to understand why we paid all this money to separate a system that's not separated. And that's my question. Thank you.
Nick, I'll take this one. So as part of sewer separations, first and foremost, as you mentioned, it's a significant investment. In the city of Grosse Pointe Park's case, it involved tearing up the majority of city streets, putting in very deep sewer, very expensive sewer, that had to all get to a single point to a large pump station. I will say that the vast majority of the city is fully separated. But as is the case in honestly most sewer separations, it's pretty common that things are just not known. There's sometimes poor records from a city like this that has infrastructure that's over 100 years old. Things happen not always with permitted activities, so things get discovered. The important thing is to have a strategy in place when those are discovered to act on them. And so the city, as they do discover illicit connections, they're working with property owners to alert them of that and get them to disconnect that, because it is a requirement with a separated system that you do have to separate any illicit connections that are present. Things that were mentioned in the presentation about smoke testing, that's another way to do it. But even that, sometimes, depending on plumbing that is particular to that instance, it doesn't find all of them. So it's part of a constant effort to continuously evaluate, continuously get more data, and just trying to work better. And I think going forward, I think that's part of the vision, is that there's going to be a continual checking of how we're doing on metrics. So you can even see, is your community getting drier over time? Because we look at how much of the rain that falls over a community, how much is that getting into the sanitary system? There's metrics that we can look at on a storm by storm basis that help to make sure we're making positive progress towards the goal of keeping the system as dry as possible.
Thank you. The next person in the queue is Betty and Steve Moore. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself. And please go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to say thank you to the public safety people. They came to our house at 6 a.m. the morning of the flood, walked through smoke, 3 feet of water in our basement, and put out a fire that probably would have caused us to lose our house. So that sort of has helped put this flood in perspective, even though we aren't very pleased about it. So thank you to the police and the firemen. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. The next person is Richard Sanderfer. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself.
Is that me, Miss Leah, you're thinking of, Richard Schroeder?
No, I'm sorry, Mr. Schroeder. It's not you quite yet. It's the last name is Sanderfer. So I see Mr. Sanderfer is unmuted. You can please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Richard Sanderfer. I live on Westchester. I've lived here for 36 years. I've been through 3 major flood events and several minor ones, all associated with similar type problems. In the major flood back in '96, the city agreed to a sewer separation project, spending somewhere in excess of $20 million to do it. We paid for it. The promise by the engineers at the time was this would eliminate the problem. We would not have another flood because of the storage facility that existed under Jefferson being over 1 million gallons, that was more than sufficient capacity to handle any kind of sewage issue that we were dealing with, and the major problem associated with stormwater would be handled by the sewer separation and pumped out at 3 Mile Park. Obviously, the engineers were wrong. We spent a lot of money and we didn't get what we were promised. One of the problems associated with that promise was that the city agreed to close the Fox Creek bypass because of that bypass, because of that sewer separation project, and the residents were along with it. That was a major mistake on the part of our city. We have no ability to stop this problem as long as the Fox Creek bypass is closed. At the last flood in 2015, it was 2016, it was recommended by a group of citizens to the city very strongly that they go back and negotiate with the state and open back up the Fox Creek bypass. It is the only way that the city of Grosse Pointe Park will ever be in charge of their own destiny again. The failure in 96 was a personnel failure. The city had the resources in order to control the flood, and on a major rain event, sent the pump operators home. And they had to return in order to be able to turn the pumps on to stop the flooding. But they had the ability to do it. They had the ability to vent into Fox Creek, as undesirable as that is. And I'll be the first to say that that is not a desirable situation, but it's a whole lot better than filling our basements with sewage. The Fox Creek bypass has to be reopened. If it is not, this problem will never go away. We can talk about backflow preventers. We can talk about sump pumps. Every time somebody does something new, it just creates a different problem. If everybody in this city pumps their basements out to the street, what do you think is going to happen? Number one, it's no different than the Fox bypass being open, because all the raw sewage out of their basements is going to pump to the street, go into the sewer separation system, go down to 3 Mile Park, and be pumped into the lake, just the same way. There is no solution here that is going to fix this problem without opening the Fox Creek bypass, and it needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person in the queue is Kim Berger. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself. And please go ahead.
Hi, I live on Kensington, and just as a general statement to some people's questions regarding sump pumps, I have an interior waterproofing system in my basement, along with 2 sump pumps, which worked and were working throughout the entire event 2 weeks ago. And I still had 2.5 feet of water in my basement. So I'm just going to say sump pumps are not the answer, particularly in this situation. But my question really is for Patrick, the engineer, I believe. So I've read the report from Great Lakes Water Authority about the issues that they had at the Connor Creek and Freud pumping stations during this event. And based on the presentation from earlier in this meeting, it appears that all the Grosse Pointe Park pumps were operating sufficiently. So my question is let's say Freud and Connor Creek were both operating sufficiently, they didn't have any operational problems. Would we still have had this issue? Would this backup still have occurred? Because then really, what is the solution here? Because as many people have said, these are not 1,000-year, 100-year events anymore. These are every couple years. So if we don't come up with a solution, the solution for many people is going to be, I'm moving somewhere that has better infrastructure. So this is a really big problem that we need to address.
Thanks for that question. I think on the GLWA system, what I'll say about downstream conditions, when the water surfaces are up, it reduces the city's pump efficiency. So if you're literally pumping against a river, you're just not going to be able to keep up with it. And so why that water surface was where it was is something that we will look to see what comes out of GLWA's detailed analysis of, is it called the after event analysis? There is a very complex system of interceptors and large diameter sewers that connect together. And while some of the routing of the sewage may not be directly to Frood or Connor or all the other various pump stations in the area, everything's tied together. So as water surfaces rise, it affects all the sewers. So we really have to get, I guess, some details about how high that water was in the Detroit River Interceptor, which is the pipe immediately downstream of Grosse Pointe Park, to get a full understanding on how that affected our ability to dewater the Grosse Pointe Park system. And relative to the comment about, you know, the 1,000-year event, I think we hear you loud and clear that that nomenclature is becoming less and less relevant because this is becoming more common. And that's part of discussions that have already been underway with Eagle and will continue to be underway about calibrating our system to the new reality of what we see all too frequently. And so that is going to mean, you know, finding ways to build resiliency on our own, and then also working with adjoining communities to manage things more efficiently. There's efforts right now going on with GLWA to try to find out how to manage their system more efficiently, because it's a large region, all the rain's not falling. We saw it, especially with this event. It was an extremely intense rain event that was only a few miles wide. You go a few miles north and they were not getting the precipitation volumes that we had. So that lends itself to operational opportunities within GLWA to hold back water in certain areas. That can't be done in silos, and GLWA has reached out, and Grosse Pointe Park will be a partner in that conversation about how collaboratively that master that system overall can be managed to basically create capacity when it's needed on a fairly quick acting basis with remote actuation.
Thank you. The next person in the queue is Richard Schroeder. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself, please.
Good evening, Miss Leah. I hope you're doing well tonight. I got bad news for all of us. The cavalry is not coming. If you look to see what Whitmer's got planned for us with FEMA money and COVID money, it's not coming. You can just look to Midland to see how much money they've gotten from how many years ago when they got flooded. We're on our own. We got to figure this out on our own. And the Great Lakes Water Authority, they're going to do a CYA. They're going to cover their butts, and they're going to figure out how to curtail their problems about trying to pay people out. And if they don't have enough money to pay people out, they're going to go bankrupt, and that's going to be the end of that. But as far as opening up Fox Creek Station, Fox Creek for us to dump our sewage in, the same company that sent out a letter asking us to join their class action lawsuit, which they're intending to sue the city on also, because I talked to these guys this morning. They're going to throw garbage at the wall to see if anything sticks on the park. That doesn't bode well with me. I find that disgusting, because I know that these guys, I know Nino worked his butt off. I know Nick Seisland worked his butt off, and the rest of the guys down at the city worked their butt off. They did nothing wrong. This is all in the Great Lakes Water Authority. They didn't throw the switch. But don't plan on getting any money from them either, because according to this Lydell guys that sued us originally and made us close Fox Creek, those are the guys that sued us to close Fox Creek. And now they're coming back to tell us what they're going to do for us. There is no good guys in this whole situation. If you want to figure out a way to get rid of all this water, here's what you do. You build more drains, and you're talking about millions and millions of dollars. I'm just going to do what Nino told me to do. I've got the bag full of restrictor on. I only got about 1.25 inches, and all my other neighbors got 2 and 3 feet down here in Lake Point in the 700 block. So I put the restrictor on, and I'm going to put that sump pump on. And if I need 2 sump pumps, I'm going to do 2 sump pumps. But the cavalry's not coming. We're on our own. Government's not going to take care of all our problems. And Whitner's not coming with any money. If she cared about us, she would have stopped by here, but she never even showed up around here. There's no money coming. We're on our own. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Schroeder. The next comment is from Ryan Melville. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself. And please go ahead.
Hi, actually, this is Katie Melville. I'm on my daughter's computer as I lost my computer in the flood. And I just wanted to say that I grew up in Grosse Pointe Park, and this is very emotional for me because in the last year, my daughter bought up the street from me and my niece 3 blocks away. And they flooded as well as we did. And I want to know how I'm supposed to say to them, you made a good choice. Because being here as many years as I have, I've grown to love the city, and I do respect everybody on the council and the police and fire, as they have served us very, very well. But I've yet to hear one answer or any type of sentence that is going to give us comfort that this is something we can resolve. I realize it's not a simple fix, but it's something that has not even made us feel better that there is a future that our basements can become a part of our homes again. I think as we all saw at the curbs, that square footage of each of these homes is a huge part of our lives, and that there is no way that we are going to be able to rebuild until we know that this is resolved. I know that there's a lot that's very involved, that there's so much that's got to be done, but who can say to us right now, to my daughter, her fiance, to my niece, to my youngest daughter who lives with us, and we're all living with anxiety now, that this is something that we can work towards. I have yet to hear that from anybody, and please do not respond with a website for me to look at, because that's just not going to work. Again, I thank you all for what you are doing, but perhaps we all need to look at this a little bit harder and figure how we're going to resolve it. Thank you.
I'd like to thank you for your comment. And, I would like to, as I've seen as city manager with our department heads and our staff in the city, and as members of council have seen as well, there's a fight in the city. There is a group of people within this community that have gone through many of these events and realized that, enough is enough. And your city government believes the same. One thing I have already noticed since this event is that regional partners, including the Grosse Pointes and other communities, are looking to band together to finally say enough is enough. And we need to do a better job of updating our infrastructure and getting those investment dollars. Personally, and I know some members of council could say the same, we have a group at the state and local level with our representatives and senators, Adam Holy and Joe Tate, that are very interested in helping the Grosse Pointes and the constituents secure those infrastructure dollars, as well as our Congresswoman, Brenda Lawrence. And so my best answer for you is there is a fight in the city. There is a resiliency. We will work our tails off and we will not give up. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person in the queue is Sonia Ray. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself.
Hello.
And please go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you for taking my call. And first of all, I would like to thank everyone for what they've said. I don't need to repeat what was said because I agree with them. But I just kind of want to share my situation. I've been living in Grosse Pointe for almost 20 years. And when I first moved, I lived on Barrington and we were a part of that flood. And FEMA did come out and they did give us some relief. Since then, I moved on to Pemberton. All of my children were raised here and they went to the schools and they graduated from Grosse Pointe High School. So I have nothing negative to say about this community. I have a daughter who's a lawyer and who's a doctor. But what I'm really confused about is the process in which we are handling this catastrophe. I noticed that there's no real clue guidance of how we are to report our claims. There's something about this 22 form or class action form that we can be a part of if we so choose. Last I've checked, we are part of Wayne County, and if Wayne County is receiving support possibly from FEMA, why aren't we included in that? I just don't understand that, and I would like someone to answer that question for me. Because unfortunately, my insurance does not cover this. It is out of pocket, and we've been doing everything we can to remediate our situation. Restoration companies have not been receptive to our cause because they're not very transparent. If you don't have, they want to do the work and then send you the bill. They don't want to just tell you how much, the restoration will cost. So I just want to know what is being done really for the residents, because right now I'm not very impressed.
Well, Sonia, thank you for your comments and questions. And a couple of items that I can address. The PA 222 form is a public act that from the event, which was on June 25th and 26th, as by the state of Michigan, you were required to fill out a form within 45 days detailing the amount of damages and losses to your home and to your properties. The city right now has this form available on its city website, the public library, the gatehouses, and at the Lavin Center. We ask you to please fill this out as soon as possible before that 45 days, so that we can therefore turn it into our insurance company, who will therefore determine how that is disseminated. In regards to other letters that could be for class action suits that are separate from the city, and that is certainly the choice of residents if they're to do so on that. In regards to FEMA, we are hopeful that FEMA is in understanding they're coming to the region within the next couple of days, and the city is preparing for FEMA to come here. And as part of that, we're going to be showcasing, the areas in the community that have been hit. And we're hopeful that not only us and other communities that have been hosting FEMA, they will consider relief efforts for residents and city governments that have suffered so much. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person in the queue is Greg Yesbach. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself. And please go ahead.
I thought Mr. Sanderfer's comment was spot on about the gate at Fox Creek. I have both the backflow preventers and the sub pumps, and neither one of them kept up, leading to about 2 feet of water in the basement. But I'd like a more direct answer to the question. Is there an active project to get that emergency discharge open? And if not, is the city willing to take that fight on as a priority to avoid filling the basements with sewage?
Greg, thank you for your question. Since the 2016 storm event, and certainly as within your question about the Fox Creek enclosure that was closed due to a suit back in the late 90s where Grosse Pointe Park used to discharge its combined sewer. The city has been exploring and working with Eagle on providing a relief option that could be done over at Patterson Park. This is being explored currently and has been doing so since approximately 2018. Certainly we're working with the state on the need for Grosse Pointe Park to have a relief system as most communities do have a relief. Grosse Pointe Park does not. And so this is something that I am prepared for, and the engineers at OHM and our public works, that we need to have a relief option for Grosse Pointe Park in the case of these events. And so not only at that option, we are also going to be exploring others for opportunities, because we cannot continue down this road without having a relief option. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person in the queue is Steve Wilburn. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself.
Hi,
And
thank
please
you.
go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, Steve Wildern. First of all, my heart goes out to the city workers, the city manager, and the rest at the city. I know this is a really challenging time, as well as to the residents. I wanted to echo comments by caller Sarah earlier, who was concerned about the renters in her neighborhood. I don't currently rent, but I did for 10 years, and I know it's an uncomfortable thing to have to deal with a landlord. My daughter does rent in the 1000 block of Weyburn. She went 2 days after the water backup with no response from her landlord. She had water in the basement until the Tuesday following. Finally, Councilmember Relon loaned us a pump that was able to get the water out. She had no hot water for a week. Finally, a plumber has come and fixed the drainage issues in the home, but she's been told by the landlord that there's no need for mold remediation. There's wood in the basement that got soaked that's now black. There's a downspout connected to the sanitary line, and water runs down the wall when it rains. There has been no cleanup after 2 weeks. The landlord does not care. Now, my daughter lives on subsistence wages. She cannot take the time to chase websites looking for resources. She's already missed work dealing with the plumber. The city needs to push these landlords. You are allowing landlords to profit off of uninhabitable properties. This is a health crisis. We're building a new DPW facility because the current one is unsafe. We have homes that are unsafe. Will the city re-inspect these rental properties for their certificates of occupancy? Thank you.
Mr. Wildern, if you could please go ahead and send us that information to the building department, which is building@grossepointepark.org. We'll see what we can do with our resources, depending upon the landlord situation as well. We do have a list of phone numbers that are available on the FAQ that was posted and available here at City Hall if your daughter or yourself would like to seek that assistance.
Thank you. The next person in the queue is Michael Spalding. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself. And please go ahead.
Thank you. First, thank you to the DPW workers working out in the streets. I know it's tough work, and we do appreciate it. I don't understand why, if the area was declared a disaster area and FEMA funds were made available, why we haven't seen outside resources come in. We see when there is a bad storm and electrical lines are down throughout the city that utility companies from other states come in and help out. First question, I guess, would be, why haven't we seen waste removal help from out of the area and out of the state? Number two, I would reiterate the need for information. I have friends that spent a lot of money on backflow preventers in a sump system, and they had 4 feet of water in their basement. So I think the lack of information and education to homeowners on what they need to do, and what size piping they should be putting in, what size pumps they should be putting in, and what the effect of, say, five houses on a block having a backflow preventing system and sump pump does to the other 5 houses on the block that don't have it. We put our neighbors in bad situations when only some people can afford to make these changes and others can't. So I would really encourage the investigation of grants and subsidies to help the homeowners here. If we can't get the infrastructure fixed, at least we can help the homeowners do what they can do to prevent this from happening. I've been here 15 years and had 5 basement floods. So I would say those are 5-year storms, not 500-year storms. That's all.
Michael, thank you for your comments and questions. So certainly I'll reiterate that the city of Grosse Pointe Park, upon learning from our public works that this was something that was beyond their capabilities as a public works department to relieve of trash, they immediately started making calls to area vendors and working with to compete against the other communities for those contractors. We even invested looking into Ohio, areas of Lansing and Saginaw. We even went out for an emergency bid process looking for areas within the state of Michigan for contractors to come. And as part of that process too, we also reached out to Wayne County Emergency Management, looking for assistance, as well as the Grosse Pointe communities, Dearborn, Hamtramck, and others that were asking for that assistance, as you stated, that could come from other areas of the state. As well, hearing upon your comment, I know the Public Works Department definitely is going to look into investing with more information that's available for the residents, and our building department that could be for proper pipe sizes and other things. And so that certainly from this conversation tonight, this is a priority for this department. So I'd like to thank you for your comment and question.
Thank you. The next person in the queue is screen name Cassione. So I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself. And please go ahead. I can see that you're unmuted. If you can please try to go ahead and talk to me again. Okay, unfortunately, because we can't hear you, I'm going to move on to the next person. We will try you again shortly. The next person in the queue is Andrew Morrow. If you can please unmute yourself. And please go ahead. Mr. Morrow, if you would like to try speaking again. Okay, the next person in the queue is the screen name of Diodlin. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself. And please go ahead.
Hi, my name's Mary O'Donnell, and it says Dodlin on the screen because that's my husband's name. Kevin Dodlin, Mary O'Donnell. We live on 3 Mile. The two of us have cumulatively lived in Grosse Pointe Park 100 years. We love this city. We love our neighbors, our friends. I know many of you. I know the mayor. I know many city council people. I'm sorry that Mr. Seisland looks so tired, and I appreciate all the work that's been done. I'm very grateful to see all the people in the community pulling together. It's a beautiful thing. But this is not acceptable. As one of the prior citizens, Ms. Ray, said, this was a catastrophe and is a catastrophe. We in Grosse Pointe Park, we are not a third world country. We pay a large amount of taxes. We need a solution. We have had garbage out on our curb for 2 weeks. What's the plan for when the totally sad, depressing, and distressing collection of people's possessions, what's the plan to get these items removed from our curbs. I agree with Mr. Spalding, who spoke earlier. There should be a plan. Call in people.
Ms. O'Donnell, you were accidentally muted. Can you please unmute yourself again?
Okay, thank you. Okay, so my point is this is not acceptable. As Ms. Ray said, this is a catastrophe, starting with the garbage that's been out there since this happened. Let's get rid of it. What's the plan? Number two, property values. No one wants to move here. This is happening with some frequency. As I said, my husband and I have lived here 100 years cumulatively. We didn't have floods when we were growing up here.
Absolutely.
We have got to come up with a solution. I agree with Mrs. Halso and Gwynn, who spoke previously. We need total control of the system. I agree with Mr. Schroeder. The Cavalry is not coming. We have got to figure this out for ourselves. We have a lot of smart people on the council. We have a lot of smart people who work for our city. We have a lot of taxpayers who are smart, who would volunteer their time. Let's figure this out. I think we should consider a lawsuit against whoever is responsible, GLEWA, whoever it is.
Absolutely.
We need to consider a lawsuit. Number 5, this issue is sump pumps. As one gentleman just said, we put our neighbors at risk. We have enough money to buy a sump pump. But what about our neighbor? No, this is a community. We need a community solution. There are people who have spoken who said that the sump pump solution is no solution. Okay, so I agree with Mr. I think it's Seisland said this, and another gentleman who spoke, and I can't read my writing right now. We need an infrastructure strategy. We don't need politics. We need an infrastructure strategy. This is a key element of government, is providing proper sewer working. We need an infrastructure strategy. So my last point under the main point, which is this is not acceptable for a community of this stature with people who are intelligent and hardworking. This is embarrassing. So my last point is we, the city, which is a beautiful community and its citizens and taxpayers, we deserve a thorough investigation about why this happened. Why didn't the sewer separation work? Should we have the Fox Creek bypass reopened, as Mr. Sanderfer said? So we need a thorough investigation about what happened. And then we need a detailed report distributed to all members of this community who have so much distress and depression just driving down our streets and seeing the losses that people have incurred. We need a detailed report about what happened, why didn't the sewer separation work? Should we consider the Fox Creek bypass reopening? Should we sue GLEWA? Are we going to get FEMA money? And as Mr. Seisland said, are we going to have a relief option? We need a detailed report.
We need accountability.
Well, and we need a report so people can see why this happened. And then let's figure out what steps we're going to take next. Because this, as my point is not acceptable for a community of this stature, which contains such fine, hardworking, tax-paying residents. Thank you very much.
Mary, thank you for your comments.
Thank you. Just a reminder before I call on the next person in the queue, if you are not speaking, please keep yourself muted. The next person in the queue is David Walinga. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself. And please go ahead.
Hello, thank you. I have a general question regarding how the current in-place infrastructure functions. It is my understanding that Grosse Pointe Park, City, Farms, and Woods all pump to the Connor Creek Station in Detroit, And then due to that the main interceptor pipe or pipes travel through the park to Detroit. Additionally, it is my understanding that this may not be at least partially correct, but that the park is the only city of the 4 that has separated stormwater from their system. How much, if any portion of this event occurring in the park is due to the amount of stormwater coming through our city from our neighboring cities who have not invested as much in their infrastructure? What are our neighbors doing, and what is our government outreach to work with them? We need a systemic, reliable community solution. Thank you.
David, thank you for your comment. Certainly, that is something Public Works, Tom Jenny or Pat Thomas, can you talk a little about that? And Pat Droz.
I guess relative to the layout of
the system,
the Fox Creek enclosure, that does pass through the city limits. And my understanding is that it is a sealed conduit that has covers that will not allow for any of that water to come out of the pipe. So the water that goes into that wastewater, stormwater from the other communities, that same volume of water passes through Grosse Pointe Park without contributing to our system at all.
I'd
Thank
like to
you.
point out that that is incorrect.
I'm sorry, Mr. Cornell, if you want to speak again, you're going to need to rejoin the queue. The
Okay,
next
I
person
just
in
want
the
to point out
queue-
that's incorrect.
The next person in the queue is screen name of Bon and Lar. If you will, please unmute yourself.
Good evening, everyone. I think a lot of my questions have been asked by others, so I won't repeat myself, but appreciate Mary and Steve and some of the other names that I didn't write down, Michael. But I would like somebody in authority, perhaps Patrick Droz, to comment on neighbors adding sump pumps and other water relief systems in their basement and the ethical impact on neighbors. Certainly, we had 5 feet of water in our basement after 26 years of never having a drop. And certainly a sump pump, nothing could have really tolerated the volume of water that was coming in. But really, if we decided to put a sump pump in, what's the impact, the ethical impact to our neighbors who don't? So I've heard other people mention it, but I'd really like a comment from somebody in authority that understands those kind of engineering protocols. Put 2 sump pumps in, put in a, whatever pipe in your drain system, and what's the impact on our neighbors, which just from an ethical impact, I don't want to do that to my neighbors, but also I don't want to do that to the value of my home and anybody else's. So if somebody in authority could comment on that, I'd appreciate it.
Thanks for that question. It's a very thoughtful question. It kind of goes back to the fact that this is a community and everything is interconnected. The first thing I would just for clarity purposes, when a backwater valve is put in and then a sump pump is put in, the sump pump is really designed to drain the footing, any sort of groundwater that gets into the ground. Typically, without the check valve, that goes right into the sanitary. When you put in a sump pump system, that is supposed to go to the storm sewer system. Now, I do acknowledge the fact that we had a situation where the stormwater system was also surcharged, and there's comes a question of where do we put the water? What I'll go to is as part of what I think is going to be some of the next steps is looking at the system as a whole and finding ways to dry it out if there are still connected sources, to get that out of the system and to provide as much capacity to basically deal with some of that wet weather impact on the sanitary system. So if it does get into the pipe, it's not going to surcharge the pipe. I think your question about, does that negatively affect your neighbor is a good question. And I think from an engineering perspective, if you're putting that water back into the sanitary system, absolutely. But by putting it into the storm sewer system, it should be controlled in a way where that flooding, if it does happen, unfortunately it's in the street, but it's not in the basement. So that's, I think, one of the things that we'll have to be looking at in the future is basically where do we put this water? And then what are the effects of something like that if you did do sump pump selectively? Communities do look at sump pumps as a very effective way to take wet weather out of the system. In fact, many communities, as part of programs in the 90s and 2000s, did sump pump programs where they would do retrofits to neighborhoods that had experienced high groundwater flow conditions. They're effective, but it's part of like anything, you have to look at kind of the grand situation and make sure it's the right application for that.
Thank you. The next person in the queue is Renee Rodriguez. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself.
Hi.
And please go ahead.
Hi, this is Jose Rodriguez. I'm on my wife's Zoom account. And thank you for the opportunity to be able to speak. Our story has been shared widely on Facebook. We're on the 1300 block of Beaconsfield and blessed to have such really great neighbors. Summary of our situation. So we had the situation on Saturday. We had standing water in our basement until Tuesday because our basement drain did not work. Until the plumber came out, we had toilets that did not flush. We had a hot and damp house that stunk. We had air that we could not breathe. And then right now, we have had to pay out of pocket to address the plumbing, and we're finally getting a restoration company in place. 2 excavations, by the way, I was just reminded, we had 2 excavations with the plumbing company to finally resolve the issue. What concerns me is that I've heard more than one person saying that they've had flooding about every 2 or 3 years. Now, and I can't speak about anybody. I don't know that this is something that my family could afford to have happen every 2 or 3 years. Because what's basically going to happen, I'm sure you all in city government understand, is that if this keeps happening, what you're going to be facing is a mass exodus of people because they will not be able to afford their insurance. They're not going to be able to afford the out-of-pocket expenses. And you know what? If they leave and we join them, I don't know that I would blame them because this is inexcusable that this happened. Nobody should have to face this every 2 or 3 years or whenever it happens. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person in the queue is Lynn Bernardi. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself.
Hi.
And please go ahead.
There's been a lot of discussion about the sump pumps and backflow preventers and what we could individually do to prevent this from happening. But the thing is if the sewer system is overwhelmed and it's going into the storm sewers, that water is going to go into the street. And once it does, it's going to go into your house. And I personally had water coming in my first floor from my side door. I had water that broke through a basement window and was coming in that way. I mean, the bulk of my water did come in through the sewer, but some water was coming through the street as well. My back porch, my sunroom flooded, my garage flooded. We lost 2 vehicles. So it's great to talk about backflow preventers and stuff, but there's a bigger infrastructure problem here that's not being addressed.
Thank you. The next person in the queue is Vanessa Hernandez. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself.
Responding to these comments and questions. Why is everyone sitting silent?
Again, I'm going to remind everybody that if you are not speaking, you need to remain muted.
No, I'm speaking.
Ms. Hernandez, if you would like to go ahead, please.
No one is responding.
Yeah, so my whole basement is flooded, and this is, I don't know what, but my whole flooded, my kid's room is flooded, and hopefully somebody will come out and fix it. I don't have a plumber come out at all and fix it, and hopefully somebody will come out and fix it. Thank you.
Ms.
Thank
Hernandez,
you.
where do you live? Ms. Hernandez, where do you live?
And well, and Poda.
Ms. Hernandez, if you could call City Hall 313-822-6200, and please let us know where you live. We'll be open tomorrow from 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Nick.
The next person in the queue is Robert S. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself, please. And please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you so much. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, excellent. I'm going to be very brief. Just want to let you know I just moved into Grosse Pointe Park about a year or so ago. My daughter just came to live with me, helping her out with some of her educational goals. She's 27, and we got 2 grandkids with me. So, you know, we're definitely enjoying the community. But this has been very tragic, you know, for us, you know, baby clothes lost. I'm an IT trainer, you know, I have an IT training company. It's a nonprofit. I think I had about 50 monitors downstairs, about 30 computers, other peripheral devices and computer components, all gone. You know, I had a summer class starting July the 5th. Going to do cybersecurity, some robotics, and other things for disenfranchised youth in Detroit. You know, program, you know, it's just not happening right now. So it's definitely been devastating for me, and also a letdown for the students that were going to participate in this program. So I'm very interested, and then my heart goes out to other people as well who lost, you know, vehicles and other things that you can't replace. I mean, we're all going through this, and we're pretty much suffering, you know, together. So I just like to know, you know, where does the relief come from? You know, who's going to assist us, if anyone? And echoing what everyone else is saying about the infrastructure, you know, what are the plans? You know, we definitely enjoy the community. You know, I've been an East Sider for some time, but this has definitely been devastating. And I just hope that there is a resolution, you know, immediately. I've heard some things. I think the mayor mentioned that FEMA was going to be here in a couple days. I mean, are they going to replace, you know, is there a cutoff amount that they will give citizens? You know, I mean, I probably lost close to $30,000 worth of computer equipment. You know, granted, I'm a nonprofit, perhaps, you know, I can go out there and see if someone can assist. But I mean, as far as FEMA is concerned, I mean, are they coming, and, you know, what is the plan? That's all I have for now.
Robert, thank you for your comment. Just to reiterate again, the city is in contact with Wayne County Emergency Management and Homeland Security, and that Wayne County is letting us know that FEMA should be visiting the area within Grosse Pointe Park. Afterwards, that FEMA visits the Grosse Pointes or the park, it'll take some time for them to be able to find their determination whether there is some relief. And so as soon as we are able to provide that information, we will be providing it to the community.
Thank you. Thank you.
The next person in the queue is, I'm going to have screen name Pixione try again. So if you can unmute yourself, please. And if you can try talking for me again. I'm sorry, but we still can't hear you. City Manager Seisel, that's the last comment I have before there are people who have already spoken before. Thank you.
Thank you, Leah. So I do want to thank and ask real quick that if there is anyone that has not been able to speak yet, if they could please raise their hand in order to be able to participate in your comments or questions. After that, we will go through and wrap up with those that have a second question, but I would please ask those that have not been able to make a comment or a question to raise their hand at this time.
Thank you, City Manager Seisland. I do have one new person in the queue. Jeff Greer, if you can please unmute yourself and go ahead.
Thanks, Leah. I just want to thank Nick and the mayor and the council and all the city employees who have been working around the clock since this happened. Thank you, everybody, so much for your time, energy, and to try to fix this situation. Nick, I submitted a list of questions that I had gathered from citizens on Facebook, and I sent you an email earlier today. I don't expect that you've read that, but most of those questions have been addressed in this conversation. The one thing I was hoping you could talk a little bit more about was the reimbursement process. If we submit a claim to the city, what happens there? Is the city going to cooperate with those claims and try to get us reimbursed through insurance? Can you just talk a little bit about how that works? If you know, and if you don't know, that's a fair answer too.
Thank you, Dr. Greer. So, I'll step back a little bit and then I'll provide what I can, but this would be a question better suited for the insurance carrier and will be provided further as we move forward within this process. However, there's PA 222 form that many of you have heard. There's a requirement that within 45 days from the storm event, you have to fill out a form, which we have at City Hall, Lavin Center, Gatehouse, and such, that details the amount of damage to your home and your property and in your investments, whether that's your car and other areas. So after taking some time, which it's also available, fillable form on our city website, document, take pictures to the best of your ability, save receipts certainly as well. We are taking that information through clerk@grosspointpark.org. And what we are doing is that we will be forwarding that information over to our insurance carrier who will be handling this claim. They will then, after those 45 days, they will review the information and they will make a determination and or it'll move forward to another entity. So that's my summary, Dr. Greer. Other than that, I apologize as I did not get a chance to review your email yet, preparing for this meeting, but thank you for providing those comments and questions.
Thanks, Nick.
Thank you, City Manager Seisland. At this time, I do have people who would like to ask additional questions in the queue, so I'm going to go ahead and call on those individuals. The first person is Mr. Sanderfer, so if you can please unmute yourself. And go ahead, please.
Okay. So this question is addressed to Mr. Seisland. Your previous comment was that there were discussions taking place about the Fox Creek bypass and reopening of it. The first part of the question is, this was asked for by the citizens 5 years ago. So 5 years from now, are we going to still be in this same situation of the discussions are ongoing and we're trying to figure out what we're going to do? Or can you explain why in the past 5 years, nothing has been done to accomplish this task? We knew it 5 years ago. We knew that there was a major problem. We knew it was just going to take another major storm to cause the problem again. And here we are. So the question is, how long is this process going to take? And what is your belief that we will be successful in opening the bypass? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sanderfer, for that question. So as I detailed earlier in our presentation, and Patrick Droz did as well, since 2016 at that storm event, The city of Grosse Pointe Park has invested almost $1 million into upgrades to our sanitary and storm system infrastructure. This includes new pumps, rebuilt pumps, transformers, backups, as well as redundancy measures, moving equipment that is non-submersible above flood levels as well, so that in the case of what happened in 2016 would not happen again within our pump station here at Jefferson at City Hall. In regards to the Fox Creek enclosure, that was, as you stated, due to a suit back in 96 or 98. But that's something certainly the city will have to have further conversations, with the state and others to those matters. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person in the queue is Mr. Corneille. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself, and please go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment on what Mr. Droz said about the Fox Creek enclosure, that it passes through not connected to any of our systems, and it distresses me that you don't know that, because don't know that it does connect. Certainly at the 1100 block of Bedford, certainly Pat Thomas will be well familiar with this, but it concerns me that that is not being considered as part of the problem. I can provide you photographs at 2 o'clock on Saturday morning showing a geyser of water coming up from the storm system. And that's a direct connect.
I think we'll definitely have to document that, and sounds like some things that can be addressed potentially immediately if that is an issue where it's contributing to our system. So yeah, if we can get that information, that'd be very good to have, and we can start looking at what we can do to address that issue. That's part of the thing, is when we do find any sort of interconnections or illicit connections, to have the action plan in place to be able to act on those, either through a private property owner or if it's in the public right away, to find an opportunity for that to be dealt with accordingly.
Thank you. I do have one person in the queue who hasn't spoken yet. So David Kwan, I'm going to call on you next. You can please unmute yourself and go ahead.
Hi, I'm David Kwan. Moved here about 11 years ago from the People's Republic of Ann Arbor and served on city council there. Just curious, I know there was some efforts to disconnect rain gutters or the downspouts from footing drains or flowing into sewer. Is there an actual active program, or has there been one to disconnect, the storm sewer or footing drain sewers from the sanitary? I know in Ann Arbor they did that, and as a developer, we used to have to pay $9,000 or $10,000 to disconnect someone else's sewer before we could build something else.
Thank you for your question, Mr. Kwan. Certainly, I have heard about that experiment, or I shouldn't say that's the wrong term, but that program in Ann Arbor. Patrick Droz, our engineer, has discussed that, as something that was done in Ann Arbor. It was very costly in regards to removing downspout disconnects from the system. This is something that was identified, within our smoke testing a couple of years ago. And as well, when we're having inspections of properties, whether that's a rental inspector, building and such, they're looking for those illicit connections as well to identify to the city. And we have those follow-ups with those property owners, for separating from their system. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person in the queue is Sarah Boyd. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself. And please go ahead.
I'm speaking again because we've now, to our city manager and our city engineers and our council members, you've been listening to residents for the past 2 hours, and the majority of the comments had zero reply, nothing said back to them unless the person asked for a reply like I did. So I'm just asking for replies from what you've heard, any action steps or anything that you have now learned. I'm asking to hear feedback and not just silence.
Thank you, Sarah. As we've discussed throughout this meeting, from myself, the team at City Hall, and as well as the engineer, I do believe that we do have a plan in place for looking at areas that we need to identify potential problems and provide solutions. That was identified within our FAQ that we are definitely going to be working with more, as well as the short and long-term solutions within the OHM report, discussing resiliency and working with the other communities, as well as those with Eagle in the state of Michigan and our regional partners. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person in the queue is Richard Bosler. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself, and please go ahead. Mr. Bosler, we can't hear you. If you can try speaking again, please.
Okay. My question is regarding the PA 222 claim form. I think the city council needs to address the 45-day time period because I think it should be extended. Otherwise, I think you're going to get a lot of amendments, especially for the people that actually had a redo on their basement flood today. So city council, to me, needs to address that PA 222 claim form because they're going to get a lot of claims and how to handle them. There's no numbers on them. And that's one thing. And of course, my other comment is make sure that you leverage all the other communities around the surrounding Detroit metro area that really are highly acclaimed with best practices, and to leverage them as well. Thank you.
Thank you. The last person in the queue, second to last person in the queue is Richard Schroeder. So I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself.
Sorry to bother
And
you.
please go ahead.
Sorry to bother you again, Ms. Leah. What I forgot to mention when I talked to the people at the law firm Lydell, who I think pretty much we've all gotten a letter from, I asked them what we could expect as far as getting money back if we join this class action lawsuit, which at this point I'm totally against. I was against last time. Was they said the average was 4 to 5% on the dollar. So when you think about them getting 33.3% and the people that actually need this money is getting $4 to $5 for every $100 they lost, it's I don't think we can look to them to make ourselves whole either. I've talked to people that tried to put in FEMA things from all over the country in the last hour. They said that years from now, you might see a few bucks. And once again, looking in at Midland, they haven't seen a penny yet. So some of the people have gotten a little bit of help. Those were the ones that were really devastated. But once again, I truly think we're going to have to do this on our own. And dumping our garbage into Fox Creek one more time, I find that distasteful to do that to neighbors in another city. And thank you again. I hope you all have a good night.
Thank you. The next person in the queue is Barbara DeBetz. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself.
Yes,
and please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. This is Joseph. I've been a longtime resident of Grosse Pointe Park. I love the city. And I remember growing up 60 years ago with these kinds of issues, starting at my parents' home. And then once I bought my own home on Buckingham, the problem continuing and persisting. Again, on Beaconsfield, now I'm on Bishop. So with all due respect to those individuals that are leading this effort, I want to thank you for your effort, but I want to propose to anyone who's listening that we really might want to consider using our democratic processes to consider electing leaders that actually can not only identify the problem, but can solve the problem. Because I agree with the other gentleman who talked about how the problems persisted for 5 years. I would argue that it's persisted at least as long as I've been alive, which is 60 years. So again, I'd encourage people to consider voting these individuals out of office and identifying people that are actually competent to address these issues and actually solve them. Thank you.
Thank you. The last person in the queue is Allison. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself.
Hi.
And please
can
go
you-
ahead.
Hi. Thank you again for making this opportunity available to all of us. I know we're all frustrated, upset, and it's very disturbing. We currently live on 700 block of Balfour, and we were told by the city, we moved here in 2009 and our backyard never flooded. Then around like 5 years later, it floods all the time, to the point where it flooded so far up our backyard this time, it went into our garage and came through some of the walls. The city came out, they told us that there was a broken sewer drain, a storm drain in our backyard along the fence line, and that it wasn't a big concern. It's just your lowest in the property area, so you will get a lot of rain, whatever. They filled this like sinkhole we have in the back corner with rocks. They never put a camera down there, nothing. Now our backyard floods all the time. You can see where both neighbors to our left and to our right have about 4 to 6 inches where their fences have gone down. And I want to know what we can do about this, because it's going to be a big issue when these utility poles that are along this fence line start to sink and cause a problem for, everybody in this area when we lose power and all that. Thank you.
All right, Allison, I'm sorry. To get my phone, I'll switch it up here. We'll do is we'll take your call us tomorrow at 822-5100. We'll get your address more and your phone number. You'll come over and look and see what's going on over there. I'm talking with Pat right now about it, and he's got a dumbfounded look on his face. So we're trying to figure out what's going on. So please, tomorrow, give us a call early in the morning. We'll head out and see what's going on in the backyard there. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much.
City Manager Seisland, I have no further public comment at this time.
Leah, thank you. I guess I'll go with a quick closing statement. I'd like to thank everybody for being on this call and opportunity tonight to discuss with you these hard events that we have here in Grosse Pointe Park and within the region. I want to thank our staff here at City Hall for all their hard work, our public works, public safety, the support of our city council, and their help in making this, that we're going to find solutions, and that I want to thank everybody for all of their help and resolve, as well as their patience as we're working through this time. Thank you, and have a good night.
Thank you all for attending, and have a good evening. This has been very helpful, I think, for us to hear from you, and a lot of notes have been taken, and I'm sure that it will provide great input for next steps going forward. Thank you, and good evening.